So this meeting, the meeting is not being called to order yet because BCM is not available for us yet. So we still a couple minutes before we can start going.
But if any members here would like to speak at public comment when we do start, just if you could fill out a blue card for me right up here at the front. Thank you. No, so, well, you can do it one of two ways. If you want to speak at public comment, which is the third item on the agenda, you can speak about any item. If you'd prefer to wait and speak when that item comes up, just write that on the card and that'll be at the chair's discretion. Sure. Good question. Oh, the speaker cards are right here. Yeah, I only have, do you need more pens? If I can just get them before the meeting starts, that would be great.
That's smart. There's a TV right there. Okay. Does? It's not on. It's not on. Oh, it is.
Get us set up. Yeah, so I will try just listening in.
Do you happen to have the original one?
Say something.
It's somewhere in this bucket.
No,
Hello.
I'm trying to connect that too. So as soon as the
Hello. Hello.
on BCM, are you able to get that?
Say to the king for me. Say to the king. That was so weak. Okay, don't do it. Don't do it. Say to the king. Don't do it. Don't do it. That is straight up.
That's probably Mike Knox. Right now I'm just trying to roll in there.
Hello.
And the NAACP made those recommendations on housing, and we worked on trying to do a joint item. And then you had your item, and I had mine.
Hi.
Okay, give me about 5 minutes and while I'm waiting for BCM.
My name is Alani. Hello. What? Wait, what are you doing? No, you don't know what it said. What did that? Does somebody have a whoopee cushion? No, if you twist this. Oh. Listen. Mine isn't like that. Somebody fight it.
Like, this is okay that we're letting you do?
Like a real politician. I'm so proud of you. Your parents would be proud of you.
Okay.
Exactly.
How do I turn it off? How do I turn it off?
What's that?
How do I turn it off?
You undo that light.
Okay.
students, and the students are writing letters.
I know, but
Yeah,
the students.
so I'm like, I don't wanna fight that. Y'all keep that shit. Sit on it and walk. I think that's still a.
It's raining, you guys. It's raining. Can't do it. Wait, can I hear something?
My moves. That's my facilitator move.
Are you guys making rain?
Yeah. It's raining really hard. Okay. That should do it. It's raining now. Why does James always have to introduce himself?
Because James is a man about town.
Yes, sir.
Earphones in my bag.
This is cool. No, go on YouTube. Go on YouTube.
No.
Yes, go on YouTube. I said go on YouTube. What? It's not working. What's up? Go ways. Attention, please. We are awesome. You didn't say it like. Go ways. I should be announcer. Pizza is good. Only some kinds. Garlic bread is good. Wait, don't turn off. It's raining. It's raining. Okay, fine.
wanted to speak to the board at public comment? No. There's the agenda, and then these are two items that one of our commissioners distributing tonight that are not in. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. All right. Testing, testing. So according to BCM, we are live. According to KPFA, we are live, and the captioning test is a go. So thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I am calling to order a regular meeting of the Rent Stabilization Board for April 18th, 2019. So, Ms. Amy, when you're ready, let's do roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Alpert.
Present.
Chang. Murphy.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. Pablet. Oh, it's this one.
Present.
Okay, if everyone can make sure their
Present.
microphones are on, that would be great. Pablet present. Solosky.
Present.
Thank you. Simon Weisberg.
Here?
Sotovihil. Yes. Tregub.
Present.
La Verde.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's see, does anyone want to move the agenda?
No.
I see, let's call Commissioner Sotovihil and then Commissioner Tregub.
Two modifications. First, I'd like to move action item 6A5 to become 6A1, and then item 6A4, I'd like to remove it from the agenda, if that's okay with Commissioner Solosky.
Yes, you have my okay. Oh, yes, you have my okay on that.
Second, does anyone
So
want
that's a motion.
to motion? Do I have a second?
I have a second,
second.
except I will, oh, actually, please, let Commissioner Murphy second. If it's a friendly amendment, I would like to move action item A2 to consent, if that is okay.
Actually, can we move 6A1 to consent as well?
I would like to discuss 6A1 just a little.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Fine.
I'm sorry, could we first clarify who the seconder was?
Christina Murphy, Commissioner
you.
Murphy.
So let me repeat this. So we're moving action item 6A5. We're moving that up to make that 6A1. And then we're going to not discuss item 6A4. It's going to be removed. Correct? Okay.
And then there was a friendly amendment, but I didn't, several people were talking at once.
Is to move 6A2 to consent.
Is that okay with the mover and the seconder?
Yes.
Great. Any other changes?
Any other changes? Yeah. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No? Okay, motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. So let's go to the action items now then.
Oh, there's a public forum.
Oh, actually, yes, sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Trigger. So, yes, we have public forum now. We have Mr. Steve Martineau, you want to speak? And I just want to confirm that you're going to be speaking now 2 minutes?
Excuse me?
Are you, I know that you want to speak twice today, so.
Yeah. So I'll be very brief this time because what I was going to speak about was moving 6A5 to 6A1, which apparently has already been done.
Great.
And what I would simply like to add to that is that in the interest of better democratic procedure, that in any of these meetings, and we're putting this forth in the council as well as in the commissions, that if a number of people come who are really interested in an issue, that the council or the commission always take that into account, honoring the fact that people have come to speak on an issue, and put that first. That is, if there are a number of people who come to speak on a particular issue, it should, in a pro forma way, be put first. And so I would like to introduce that here, that it be added to the rules, and if we can get it added to the rules on a number of commissions, it will be, like a precedent for adding it to the rules of the council itself. So I just wanted to add that, and I'll speak later on the item, which is now 6A1. Thank you very much.
Well, it's coming up, actually. Anyone else would like to speak?
Sorry.
Two more cards?
Diana would like to wait until that item. Kimberly Majid, I'm sorry, would like to speak now. She wants to wait until this item, and Willie did not specify.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Majid, Kimberly, do you want to speak? Or Majid, sorry. I do have a tendency to destroy people's names sometimes, so I apologize.
Okay, hi. This is about the 3 to 5 ordinance, I guess. Am I speaking at the right time? Okay. My husband works here. He's worked here for over 10 years for a well-established company. And I'm really not sure what the 3 to 5 a.m. time frame is targeting and what's supposed to be going on between those hours. I know the businesses are closed, so it's not like anything's going on there. And everybody else is sleeping and getting ready for a nice day ahead of them. Meanwhile, we have to drive around before my husband has to go to work and face a long, hard day. And they have to do the same thing over and over again. It's not fair. You know, I vote in the city. I just got called for some jury duty, summons for jury duty. I did my responsibilities and I fulfilled them. The time frame, the whole ordinance is just, it's just not fair. And I think somebody should look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's see, does anyone want to speak right now? Anyone else? We have Mr. Phillips. Willie, do you want to come up and speak right now? Yeah. No, this is just anyone who wants to speak at the public forum. We have public comment. Haven't reached that agenda item yet. Okay, so we have Ms. Amber Whitson. Okay, you want to speak on the item? Okay, so if we have no one else who wants to speak on this issue, then let's go to our next item on the item number 4, consent items. Does anyone want to approve?
I will move the consent items.
Turn on your mic.
Sorry, second.
Thank you.
Okay, does everyone agree? Any roll call? I mean, all in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. So we all in agreement here. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to action items. So now we're going to go to speak on item 6A1, which is now the item on the RV issue. So people who would like to speak, we have Ava, who can come up now if you want to speak on these items. Or, excuse me. Actually, thank you. You know, first of all, I'm sorry. We have our mayors here, Arreguin. So Mayor, if you want to come up and speak first.
Good evening, Rent Board Commissioners. I want to address the new item 6A1, and I want to update you on what the City of Berkeley's doing after the vote that took place in March to provide safe spaces for people to park recreational vehicles in the City of Berkeley and regionally. So as somebody who has been housing insecure in my life and who at one point lived in a vehicle because we were evicted, I take this issue personally. It's been a very difficult issue for the City Council and the City of Berkeley to address. And I understand people's anger and fear and concern about what the city is going to do on this issue. And Unfortunately, the city council was presented with not a lot of great options. And I advocated in early July of 2018 to permit individuals to park their vehicles at His Lordship's parking lot, and to ask the state of California to change the designation to allow vehicular camping at His Lordship's parking lot. Unfortunately, I was not able to get 5 votes on the city council to do that, and the city enforced, and people moved throughout the city, and there's been a large concentration of RVs in West Berkeley, which is what prompted the city manager to bring this item to the city council. And so I want to ensure, and I think the majority of the city council wants to ensure, that we can find places for people to park their vehicles safely. And so I have been working with the Berkeley Unified School District to allow the parking of vehicles on school district property for families, and we're working to identify those families and to develop a program in partnership with the school district to allow vehicular camping on district property for district families. I've been working with Rebecca Kaplan and Mayor Libby Schaaf and the mayors of Albany and Emeryville to discuss a regional approach to addressing this issue, because ultimately, homelessness is a regional and it's a national problem. The fact that the federal government has not stepped up to address the growing income inequality that we are facing in Berkeley, in the region, and throughout this country, and that we have people literally living in their vehicles and living on the streets is simply unacceptable. And so we are working with the City of Oakland to explore locations in the City of Oakland and with Alameda County to allow vehicular camping. And we're also looking in the City of Berkeley at a variety of different locations. So I want you to know that I respect whatever decision you make on this issue, but I want you to know that we are trying to address this issue compassionately, and we have delayed enforcement, and my priority is making sure that we have these resources in place, and if we have these resources in place, there may not be any enforcement at all. So I appreciate your perspective on this. I hope that your input is constructive as we are working to try to identify locations, as we're working to develop resources, and as we're trying to push these other cities and the county to step up to actually address this issue meaningfully. The county has not been an engaged and active partner in this issue, and unfortunately, many cities have pushed their homeless problem onto the city of Berkeley. And so we are not stepping away from the issue. We are recognizing that this is a responsibility, a moral responsibility for our city and our region, but we also have to work with our partners to make sure that we are addressing this issue comprehensively and regionally as well, and that is what I'm working on. So I appreciate the fact that you're discussing this issue. I respect whatever decision you make, and I just want you to know what we're doing and hope that whatever input you provide to the city manager and the city council, that it is in line and constructive with the work that we're doing to actually try to find solutions to address this problem. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, I have a question.
No, let's first,
Questions can be allowed, yeah. But, well, it's up to the chair.
I would like to hear what people have to say. Okay, I'm calling up next Marjorie Wilkinson.
First, I want to thank the Rent Board for taking this issue up. I think that, like many people have said, it is a housing issue, and it is a housing issue that takes place in a critical situation in our city. I think it's very important that the city rescind this measure. It's even more important, given what's happened this week, where people who are living in their tents on the streets have been told, essentially, that they can't do that anymore. They've been given this sort of unreasonable demand that they have to fold up their tents every day early in the morning and keep them in a 3-by-3-foot space until the end of the day. So this is like an avalanche of what I feel to be very discouraging actions on the part of the city, which move in the direction of criminalizing the poor, and we simply can't afford to do that. I'm aware of the fact that this is a national problem and that the city of Berkeley can't solve this problem on its own, and I'm glad to hear the mayor talk about a regional approach. I I was there at the city council meeting when this measure was voted on, and there was a letter from Rebecca Kaplan, president of the Oakland City Council, asking our council to delay a vote in order to do more work before this measure was passed, and that was not, I didn't have any sense that the majority of the council took that seriously. We're talking about people who have figured out how to survive in what is a critically dangerous time. They live in vehicles. They shouldn't have to live in vehicles. That's wrong. But they are resourceful people, and they are people who basically just want to be left alone and to live their lives, send their kids to school, go to their jobs, and not be hassled about their living arrangement. And I think the city has an absolute obligation to respect that and to figure out how to make that possible. Months ago, there was talk about a pump-out station I think it was at the Corporation Yard. I don't remember where it was, Corporation Yard or the transfer station. No pump-out station, it doesn't exist. Last year in November, the city council voted to contract with Lava May to set up portable showers behind the city administration building so that people who didn't have homes where they could take showers could come there and take showers. That still hasn't happened. In February, the city manager asked for another 3 months to implement that. It was supposed to start in January. Our record on dealing with these critical issues is pretty abysmal, and I want to thank the council, and I want to urge you, the board, and I want to urge you to vote for the original motion.
Excuse me. Diana Book? Bone? Bone? Okay, can't read it here.
Like bad to the bone. She is one bad woman.
So I want to say everything that DeMargy said, and in addition, I just wanted to, in terms of criminalizing the poor, if I had to pay rent now, I'd be homeless too. I live in the hills, but I don't have to pay rent with my own salary. So we're all close to it, I think. Most people are, not everybody, but I'm definitely would be one of those. Also, recreational vehicles are homes. They are a place to live. There's RV parks, and I hope that Mayor Aragon will be able to be successful in getting some places for them to be in Berkeley. There really has to be a place with facilities in Berkeley for them to be. And maybe we can try again on his lordship's perfect place to have that's plenty of space. It's just sitting down there, and I don't know why the council voted against it. I didn't know about that. But anyway, please vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Eva? And Eva, can you give us your last name?
Eva Crisanti.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to agree with Margie and Diana, and also I wanted to say that His Lordship's is really a good place to try things out, and I hope we won't criminalize people who are being pushed to the brink. And I definitely see that this is a larger problem. We should be working with the county and surrounding counties. And we should do that in a way that's not just saying like, okay, well, it's not just our problem, the other counties have to deal with it too. It can't be an excuse. We have to really work with them. I did want to say, I have been meeting with quite a few RV people, and Steve Martineau has this whole, pro-democracy thing, and it really put me in mind of the original ideals of Athenian democracy and all the culture that surrounded it. But when I see the RV people advocating for themselves, they remind me very much of the characters in Aristophanes' comedies who are very resourceful. And even when they're dealt a bad hand, they keep their sense of humor and their wits about them. And I can't tell you how honored I am to speak up in favor of their rights as human beings to have a place that's safe to live and where they can have access to showers and restrooms. Because I think it's in the greater ideal of democracy as the first democracy we saw, which of course was influenced by all sorts of cultures surrounding Greece. So very multicultural, even for that time. So I hope you will vote in favor of people having a safe place to live and not to criminalize people just because they're poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Martineau?
Let me begin by acknowledging what Jesse Arreguín said, that they're looking for ways of dealing with and taking care of the people who are in RVs. But it would seem to me that a compassionate approach would have been to look for ways of dealing with the problem of people living in RVs first, before passing anything draconian. Because that measure, that ordinance that they passed, is not only draconian, it's cruel. It is dehuman, it's inhuman and dehumanizing. And so I am absolutely delighted, I am really delighted that this body is actually discussing an ordinance that would recommend to the city that they trash it, that they just throw it out. It has to go. It is so cruel and so ugly on the face, on the political face of this city, that I can't see how we could stand it. Now, there are all kinds of other alternatives. If we look at Oakland, 4 churches came forward and said, hey, we got parking lots here. Use them. They're God-given. They're Mother Nature given their space. There are churches here in Berkeley. They have parking lots too. It wouldn't take more than an hour to on the phone, survey or canvass all of the churches in this city and say, hey, you got any parking lot space that you know, like maybe you could use? Well, maybe on Sunday they could move out and then Monday morning go back in or something like that. It can always be worked out. How many people came forward during the actual city council discussions and said, I can park an RV in front of my house? I remember 3 people at least saying that, you know, like, we can park an RV in front of my house. So the possibilities are there. To have been compassionate would have been to look at all those possibilities first, before moving to the draconian, before calling the cops, before doing something cruel. So I really want to thank you for bringing up this measure to take that draconian measure and throw it in the bay, to rescind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nagin?
So glad to finally make it to one of these board meetings and see all of your faces. Really important that you guys try to rescind this and think about it deeply. I was there, I don't know how many of you were there that night at the city council meeting, and I was kind of shocked because about 100 people spoke. A very small handful spoke in favor of the RV ban, and there was actually one lady who was a tow truck operator that came out to speak in favor of the RV people. And the mayor asked her to leave her name because before taking vote, he was sure that it would pass, and we need your services to start this and put it in motion, the action of actually towing these people. So there were a lot of things discussed that night, and it was already taken into action to pass this and go to the next level. And I believe it was all of the people's will that has slowed it down to this point. Not only is it inhuman, the United Nations Special Rapporteur had come to Oakland and the Bay Area and finds these conditions absolutely deplorable, the worst they've seen anywhere. The number of elderly and disabled people outnumbers anywhere in the world, and they're just being pushed from place to place. This is Berkeley. What happens here sets a standard for the rest of America and the rest of the world. A lot of the newest and most innovative things have been started here. Let's not start with becoming the most draconian and backward. Let's empower the people of Berkeley. This is our community. Whether you're in the tents, you're in the RVs, you are part of Berkeley community. No matter where you live, in the hills, in South Berkeley, West Berkeley, East Berkeley, we got to get together on this and come up with the solutions. And that night, we saw a lot of those solutions being offered by the people of Berkeley. People need to take note of that and put those questions and opinions into action instead of moving to criminalizing people that are just a result of 75% of the world's wealth captured in real estate right now. Just think of what that means. It means the 1% have to shelve their money somewhere, and it's going in these apartments and things that are market rate being built, nothing being built for the people, even on our public lands. I thank you, and I pray that you'll do the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nagin. Ms. Amber Whitson? Oh.
Hi, I appreciate your taking this up on your agenda tonight. The new ordinances, which will affect the ability of Berkeley residents to shelter themselves in vehicles without having to move their homes during hours that they should be sleeping, are wrong. Our community, Berkeley Friends on Wheels, experienced our first significant loss of members of our community when we were forced to leave the marina, and one of our families, consisting of 2 parents who were both born and raised in Berkeley, and their 3 children who were born in and were being raised in Berkeley, and who at the time were students in BUSD schools, felt that the healthiest action that they could take for their health and well-being of their family was to move to Sacramento in order to escape the persecution that they feared suffering at the hands of this city due to BMC 1440-120, which has been enforced on RVs previously. It's not like it's a new thing. This isn't suddenly going to be a new development. Lots of people who live in RVs and have been living in RVs have been forced to pay those fines, including myself, twice. The husband now commutes in his pickup truck from Sacramento to San Francisco to go to work several days a week. In fact, 2 days per week, he sleeps in the cab of his pickup truck. This is a 6-foot-something, not small guy. Sleeps in the little cab of his pickup truck 2 days a week, parked safely in between the member vehicles of the BFW, which is Berkeley Friends on Wheels, to keep his commute affordable. In fact, a couple months, he's had to spend several days at the end of the month down here away from his family because he couldn't afford to commute back and forth before his paycheck came through. I bring up the story of this family because they were forced out of the apartment that they were renting in Berkeley due to their landlord hiking their rent so high that after the death of the children's maternal grandmother, who used to provide child care while the parents were at work, they couldn't afford the rent and child care. So this is absolutely, they were forced to take out a loan, actually. The father's mother took out a loan to buy the trailer that they live in, that they were staying in when we were all at the Berkeley Marina, and that they still live in up in Sacramento. So this is absolutely under the purview of this commission, board, whatever. This is something that affects everybody in Berkeley, and enforcement of 1440-120 is expensive for the people who live in vehicles. I know, like I said, I've paid 2 of the citations. They're not small. And when you don't have much income to pay it on, it makes it seem even larger. So I think it's absolutely the only right thing to do for every board, commission, committee, resident, individual who lives in or cares about Berkeley to push for the city council to rescind or altogether halt the enforcement of 1440-120. There's no reason why any human being should be forced to only sleep peacefully for an hour between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., especially if they live and or, well, if they work or go to school and park in Berkeley. Thank you.
And our last speaker, Mr. Willie Phillips.
Good evening, everyone. I'm at least somewhat happy. I hate meetings, actually, so this is one of those meetings that I'm at that I'm compelled to go. First of all, I like to commend this particular body to actually to represent RV people. I can tell you that from the very fact is that sometimes the people who are voiceless, like people of color, like people that are on, to some extent, limited income, they're not represented. They're not represented even here, to be honest. But I recommend the very fact is that you want to rescind that. But what I'm concerned about is business as usual, making deals behind the scene and perhaps trying to water down this particular recommendation. And I like to say that shame on you if you're going to water it down. Make a decision. Be a leader. I'm saying that to even our mayor, who's in this audience, actually. Be a leader. Be someone that represents those people that are voiceless. We should know that because we are people of color and we are not represented. We don't show up at meetings because we don't believe, essentially, that we will be heard. So if you want to make a decision, don't water it down. And for the most part, you always can make decisions behind the doors. You can always kind of come up with particular compromises, but the very fact is that be a leader. Make that particular point to basically rescind this particular bill. We already know what the particular outcome will be in this particular case, and needless to say, I stand to say that you are being seen. Make yourself seen and become leaders, not followers, in terms of being able to react to a particular thing that is draconian and realizing the very fact that it is affecting people. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Halpert had a question for the mayor, I believe.
Actually, it was.
Do we want to ask him? I don't need to. It was just.
You're good?
he
Okay,
was up
thank
and
you.
I was gonna
Thank
ask
you very
him.
much.
I wanted to ask a question of the mayor.
Yes.
Or do you? Well, I don't know. The question I had was, he mentioned delayed enforcement. I wanted to know delayed until when? What does the delay look like? I don't know if other people might know that. Okay, I would like to know that.
So when we voted on March 26th, the motion was to delay enforcement until a permit system is in place for families, people who have work in the community, who have ties to the community. I think we want to prioritize land and resources first for those people who have been long-term residents of the community or are chronically homeless. And so, as I mentioned, we are kind of working separately, exploring with the school district to allow parking, whether it's at the adult school parking lot or other parking lots on district property for families. And the school district actually knows those families that are actually living in their vehicles. And so we actually had a dad who came to the city council meeting standing right here with his two young kids who said that I moved from Vallejo and I live in Berkeley now in my vehicle, and I'm worried that I'm going to have to move out. And those are exactly the people we do not want to be pushed out of Berkeley. So I'm very fortunate the district is actually open to partnering with the city on trying to dedicate spaces for families to park their vehicles. And we obviously need to discuss about restrooms and other resources that we're going to provide people. I'm literally going around town and identifying properties. And I have a long list that we're giving to our city staff, some of which we might need a lease, some of which the city may own. And I'm engaging the faith community. You know, there was reference to Oakland and the partnership they have with the faith community. I met with faith leaders last August after we were unsuccessful in having people stay at his lordship. And I had no traction. And I know Councilor Davila has convened a series of meetings around this issue with faith leaders and other cities and counties. We've not had any traction. We've approached Oakland, asked them, you have land, we will give you money if we can actually dedicate space for people to park their vehicles We've approached the county. We said, we will work in partnership with you. We have had no traction. So I want people to know that we have not been doing nothing. We have been trying. We've been trying to find land, working in partnership with other stakeholders to put the resources in place, and we have not been successful. I'm fortunate, though, I'm heartened that there has been a renewed interest in actually trying to find a solution. I mean, a lot of our discussion around unsheltered homelessness has really been focused on long-term chronically homeless individuals, and those are the conversations we've been having with Alameda County. How do we focus our resources on helping people that we are literally seeing on the street living in tents? But obviously the needs of people living in vehicles is just as important. And so there's been a renewed interest on the part of Alameda County to really look at how we can actually address the needs of people living in vehicles and living in RVs, and I think that's a good thing. So, answer to your question, the council voted to delay enforcement until that permit system is in place, and it's a longer-term permit system. Obviously, the details need to be worked out with the council through the policy committees and with staff. What I would like to see ultimately is a system where we actually have place for people to park. And so and we are providing resources and working to do housing navigation to connect them into permanent housing. And so I will admit that I think that the council's action has been very rash. It was not very well thought out. And I think in recognition of that, we have been kind of stepping back and really trying to kind of put those resources in place first, because we recognize that that is long-term the right thing to do, and ultimately the most effective thing to do to address the issue of homelessness. So I understand people's frustration. It was a very rash decision. You have my commitment. We are working very actively to try to find places to put the resources in place before any enforcement, if any, happens. I mean, ultimately, council may rescind the ordinance if we can get all these resources in place. But we also have to recognize that there have been conditions that have existed in some parts of our city where there's health and safety issues, people dumping waste into our street, other conditions that have affected the safety of residents and businesses. That does not represent every single person living in their vehicles, but there are specific circumstances that I think have prompted business owners and city staff to want to put some policy in place. Admittedly, we need to continue to work to find the right policy approach to addressing this issue.
Thank you. We have one more question for you, Commissioner Murphy.
Mayor, I just want to thank you for coming out this evening and sharing your solutions that you're, but what my question is there any reserve money for now while we're in the delay status to help with like public health safety part of it?
Yeah, no, we have councils, I didn't touch upon, I had actually talking points I was going to say when I came up here, but I want to talk about the issue of what we're doing to provide resources and space for people living in vehicles. City has spent, we have doubled the amount of general fund revenues to addressing the issue of homelessness since I took office. We've doubled the number of shelter beds. We are working on trying to create permanent supportive housing. We are pushing our partners in county and cities to try to work with us in partnership. But I recognize that that's not enough. So council has allocated specific funds to provide resources, to do outreach, housing navigation for people that are living in recreational vehicles. We actually set aside, I think it's about $60,000 of the Homeless Emergency Aid Program, the one-time state monies that were allocated to the city of Berkeley to do focused outreach to people that are living in RVs. And so we are trying to identify a nonprofit to take on that work. And once we have a nonprofit in place, we're going to actually start going out vehicle to vehicle and connecting with people, understanding what their needs are. And if somebody wants to move into permanent housing, we'll work with them. If somebody wants money to fix up their vehicle, we will be allocating money to let people fix up the vehicle. People want money to put down a down payment or rent to move to an RV park, we will provide that money. So I just want people to understand, this has been represented in the press, in the community as a very sort of callous and not thoughtful thing. Admittedly, we kind of moved way too quickly. But at the end of the day, what I'm committed to doing and what I think the majority of the city council wants to do is let's find the resources to help people, if they want to live in their vehicles, to have a place for them to live. If they want to move into permanent housing, we want to help them. So we have set aside specific funds for outreach and for these flex funds for people that are living in RVs, but there's a lot more money the city has set aside for housing subsidies and other programs that I think we need to let people know about and make available if they want to take advantage of those programs.
I just hope in the meantime, between time while we're finding the funds and the spaces, that we're sending out like mobile showers,
Yeah.
we're sending
So
out.
one of the things that we voted on was to have a mobile pump out facility. And so that is definitely something that we're going to fund and we're going to try to get in place. And we are going to be deploying LavaMay, which is a nonprofit that actually works in San
Yes.
Francisco. I've been trying to get LavaMay in Berkeley for the last 2 years, and they weren't ready until recently. And so we're going to have LavaMay in downtown Telegraph and West Berkeley, providing showers for people. We're working on trying to expand storage.
When did you say? I'm sorry.
I think LavaMay is going to happen any month now, actually. I think they've identified the
So
locations.
just hold off 30 more days and you can get a nice shower.
Yeah, so I don't know the exact time frame, but it's been in the works for several months now, and they've identified the locations. They're working on trying to kind of identify the hookups for them to do the dumping of the water and stuff, and it's going to happen imminently. We're looking at trying to expand storage, and I've asked the city manager to try to get a storage facility in West Berkeley in place as quickly as possible. So I understand the frustration. I want you to understand that some of this is the council has voted for policies, the council has allocated money, and it's been incredibly frustrating to get the kind of progress and movement to get these things done. We have allocated millions and millions of dollars to expand resources for our unhoused population, and some of these things have just taken an incredible amount of time. So, but we have things that are going to be coming into place, and we're going to continue to push. So, I mean, at the end of the day, my job as the mayor is I am a policymaker, and at the end of the day, the city manager is the person that does operational management of the city. And so while we put the resources in place and we set the policy direction, the city manager needs to act to implement the council's vision and priorities. And admittedly, that has not happened effectively or quickly as we want it to be. So
Yes. So 2 more questions for you, Mayor, and thank you very much for standing here. So Commissioner Chang and then Commissioner Alpert.
Sure, thank you so much. And I just want to start off by saying thank you, Mayor, for coming here.
yeah, it's really weird to be here.
It really does feel like this is somewhat of a hearing, and, you know, I would much rather be doing a hearing for, you know, someone like Ben Carson instead of you, Mayor, but I guess I'm glad you being here talking about housing. I guess I'll have to settle for that. In terms of the process, I really just want to point out that if we do pass this legislation today, the reality is that it will have to go to the Agenda Committee, and the Agenda Committee ultimately gets to set the tenure of which how this item gets taken on. So I just really want to thank you for this bottom-up leadership approach that you've willing to put yourself up to take questions. So my question goes to when you talked about the waterfront, right? Because initially when the RVs first came to our city, it was at the waterfront, and you took the, and you were the one that called the emergency meeting for that,
I called a
correct?
meeting within like 24 hours to stave off the eviction of the people that were at His Lordship's parking lot.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure you
And
called
Chris
them.
Worthington didn't vote for my motion.
Yeah.
It didn't pass.
And, you know, I did work for Councilmember Worthington at that time, and based on my understanding, at that time, it was because it could have been a challenge to the state's laws. So my question is, you were willing to risk that in making sure that we
So
find
I
some
am bringing an
homeless for that,
item to
right?
the Berkeley City Council on May 14th to ask the State Lands Commission to allow an exception to the grant of the management of the tidelands. Right now, the whole waterfront is granted to the city of Berkeley under a grant from the state of California to be used for very exclusive uses, recreation, limited commercial uses, you know, open space, and residential uses are not a permitted use of the waterfront. So it is correct, Councilmember Worthington was uncomfortable voting for the proposal because he felt that at that time, it would have been an action that would have been illegal. I think it's worth taking the risk, so I'm bringing an item on May 14th to ask the council to request from the State Lands Commission As long as there's a declared shelter crisis declaration in a local jurisdiction, that they should allow camping or vehicular camping on, at designated locations on Thailand's designated land.
Yeah.
So, and I've talked to our state controller, Betty Yee. I will be speaking to other members of the State Lands Commission to ask that they give us this discretion, because we're in a crisis. I mean, we have to be flexible about what we can do in this case.
And one more question. I mean, this is pretty unprecedented that a mayor has spoken in front of a council, I'm in front of the rent board, taking questions on an issue that council has taken on. Am I correct?
I've been before you several times in the past, so not unique.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Alpert.
Yeah, so my first question was going to be about the marina, but I think that was already answered.
So now you know.
Now I know.
Yeah.
My second question was going to be, you spoke about how we've had difficulties so far in getting partnerships with the county, with Oakland specifically.
Yeah.
Is there, have a letter before us today that we're likely going to be sending to the council. Is there another person or body that you think would be good for us to send letters to asking for partnership?
I think, well, I personally think you should send the letter to the city manager as well. Because at the end of the day, the city manager is the one who's implementing these things, and I think she needs clear input from the community. So that would be my recommendation to you. It would be helpful from my perspective if you did that.
Right.
I also think, on a broader level, getting Alameda County to actually partner meaningfully with the city of Berkeley and with Oakland has been incredibly frustrating. They have millions and millions of dollars that they're sitting on that they have not prioritized to address the issue of homelessness. And they have this rainy day fund. Well, if it's not raining now, I don't know when it's supposed to be raining. I mean, we have a crisis right now. It doesn't make sense to sit on $100 million and not prioritize it for housing subsidies, for mental health treatment, for respite, and for things that actually can help people that are in crisis on our streets. So I think Alameda County is another entity that needs to hear from the people of Berkeley about why they need to really step up and address the homeless crisis. That's just my perspective. So.
Thank you. So I do have two questions. So should we be sending our letter also to our representative Keith Carson on the Board of Supervisors?
I think so.
And regarding the city manager, she seems to have been or is ineffective in doing her job and getting things going. So is her evaluation going to reflect the fact that things are moving so slowly? Because things are moving slowly.
Yeah, we are bringing an item forward to conduct an evaluation of the city manager, which is something council should have operationalized as a practice. Any agency does an evaluation of their CEO or executive. The last time we did an evaluation was in 2013, I think. And so it's been some time, and the city manager's been there for about about 3 or 4 years now. So it seems like an appropriate time to do an evaluation.
I think that'd be great, because I do know that the auditor's report came out, and it showed that the city manager's office is lacking in a lot of issues.
Well, and
it
there's
was
100 plus outstanding audit recommendations that have not been implemented.
Yes, but the highest issue was with the city manager's office, and that's disturbing, because we have a lot of issues going on, and this is a crisis, and that nothing's happened. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming here to speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, so excuse me.
I just want to introduce the item.
Well, I was going to go, yes, okay. Well, go ahead. You can introduce the item, Commissioner Sotovejil.
Well, first, I want to thank everyone for coming out and voicing your opinions and your viewpoints. I do want to make a motion to accept the original proposal submitted by myself, Christina Murphy, and Chairperson Paula Laverde, with one modification, well, a couple modifications. First, we have immediately suspend or immediately rescind. I'd like to strike immediately suspend based on the testimony today. That's not strong enough. So with that, in addition, sending this to the city manager and Supervisor Keith Carson as a CC, because we haven't written a letter, and I don't want to sit here and write a letter to them about implementing something, right? It's just CCing them that we oppose an RV ban, right? We don't have time to talk about all the things that were articulated by the mayor about things that the city manager has not yet done, has been proposed, and even money been funded for years about, and she still hasn't gotten it done. So as I had advocated for a long time to remove her from her position, yet she was still rewarded with $800,000 as a housing grant, so, or a loan, excuse me. Anyway, back to the motion. My recommendation, or I would like to make a motion to recommend that we immediately send the letters as written, with the exception of striking all the rescission, or all the language about immediately suspend from the letters, and then CC it to the city manager and the supervisor. So that's my motion.
Do we have any seconds?
I can second that. I'll second that.
And I just wanted to follow up. I'm sorry. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I know that there's an amendment being brought forward, but literally what this does, this amendment, or this alternative proposal, I'll call it, is that it says to the larger community, including our folks who came present today, we oppose this RV ban, but if it's gonna happen, we wanna see A, B, C, and D happen. But guess what? The mayor just said, city manager doesn't even listen to him. So why the hell would they listen to us? And so we need to stand firm, like Mr. Phillips indicated, and be leaders of our community. Because I tell you, I spoke to Kimberly Magic today, and she was shaking in our conversation, because these kind of draconian proposals that are not thought out and has no real, it's really illogical, because when you write a policy, it's not about, what you want to do is say, hey, we want to provide housing here, or safe space for them here. We want to have some portable showers here and porta potties here, where they're centralized, right, where they could be safe, where there can be security, because they get broken into just like houses. And that's the logical approach to doing problem solving of our community of housing scarcity with this situation with RVs. You don't say it's illegal, oh, and then the community goes crazy, oh, we're gonna do some policy down the road, but it's still gonna be banned.
Okay.
It's gonna be illegal. So just real quick, I'll wrap up real quick, is that this modification is an acceptance of an RV ban, period. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been seconded. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to introduce a substitute motion that would send an amended letter to the City Council. And if I can get a second, I will speak to that.
Is there a second?
I would second it with amendments. I think I have a few other things to add.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, I wanted to echo what my colleagues have already said, thanking members of the community for being here. I know that it is not easy to be at another meeting on a weeknight, and the fact that you're here means that this is an incredibly important item to you, and it should be an incredibly important item to all of us. I live in West Berkeley. In fact, I think I know just about every one of you. It's wonderful to see friendly, familiar faces in the crowd. And so for those of you, which is most of you in the crowd, with whom we have worked hand in hand to solve this issue, thank you for coming. I will continue to work every single day to do whatever is possible to solve this horrible homelessness crisis. I remember taking the day off work to attend a special meeting scheduled in the summer I so wish that there were more members of the council there, because I think if we had one more council member present at that meeting, we may not have been here tonight, because the proposal to continue to house RVs on the His Lordship lot would have passed. I am working right now, talking to neighbors, racking my memory, going from notes about the people whose doors I knocked during my council election, who told me that they would be open in the lots that they have, in side yards, in neighboring lots, to have parking for RVs. And we're going one by one, trying to track those neighbors down and speaking with them every single week. I'm continuing to work with BUSD to talk to city staff, to see what is possible. And I think both of these items try to achieve the same goal.
No.
Excuse
Sorry,
me, I
I'm
have
so-
the
I'm
floor.
sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
With respect, thank you. They try to achieve the same goal. I think all of us here, if we were on the council, would have voted differently on the original item had it been here before us, the item that provided the punitive structures that it did. But we are not on the council. And while I can't speak to the odds of the council right now having a majority of the council rescind or permanently suspend the ordinance that was passed, I think, having spoken to members of the council, including progressive council members like Councilmember Harrison, that there is a better than 50-50 chance that if this item cannot be rescinded, that at least by our letter, by our show of moral force, we can provide those members of the council the tools that they need, the support that they need to advocate, to reduce the punitive nature of this item, and to maximize services that are badly needed in this community. And if you go line by line to the specific proposals, what it says is if the city council cannot see clear to rescinding or directing the city manager not to implement this ordinance, we recommend that prior to implementation changes be put in place. And it speaks to the changes. Immediately implement a longer term permit, which is, and this was a change that is probably going to be proposed that inadvertently got missed, that can be extended for RVs and campers based on qualifications to be determined based on the recommendations of the Health, Life Enrichment, Equity, and Community Committee, which is the city council committee charged with implementing this right now. And the reason that this is in there is when I spoke with Councilmember Harrison, she told me that she trusted that committee more than she trusted the city manager to go in and implement something that does not punish poverty. It replaces the current proposal of penalizing RV dwellers out of compliance to receipt of an infraction, which is the current council proposal, either receiving nothing at all or with a less punitive tool such as an administrative citation that does not show up on a permanent record. Working with BUSD, with the State Lands Commission, Berkeley Neighbors, and other stakeholders. And I will say that, unfortunately, that has also been my experience of not being able to get traction with Berkeley's church community. And I do hope, with the level of attention that this has generated, that perhaps those congregations will reconsider if they have the space. That would be wonderful. And to regularly and transparently share with everyone including and in particular affected community members, those RV residents that are about to be punished with the implementation of this ordinance, what measures shall be or are being taken to ensure that robust outreach and services have been and will continue to be provided to the at-risk and housing insecure populations that shall be impacted by this ordinance. So that is what this item says. The easy thing to do would be to pass something that the odds of success of which I'm not sure about. Just say open and shut, let's throw this out, no further discussion. And that is the preference in this letter as well, to throw this out. But it also provides for some solutions if the majority of the council does not see clear to throwing it out. Because I did not get elected to make easy decisions. And I slept a lot of sleep, I spent a lot of sleepless nights really grappling with this and trying to craft something that I would like to be part of the solution, right? And what I can tell you is that this is my version of pursuing my conscience, because I would not be able to sleep easily tonight if I knew that I didn't do everything in my power to bring our progressive allies on the council the solutions that they need, that they are seeking, the support that they're seeking, to be able to come up with something that works and is an alternative to what the council has passed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a substitute motion, so we need to vote on the substitute motion first. We go ahead, Commissioner Alpert, and then we're going to go. Does anyone else want to speak to this issue? Okay, so Commissioner Solosky, Commissioner Simon Weisberg, and okay, so go ahead.
I'll try to be brief. I had a couple of points that I wanted to add in line. So this is for the substitute motion in line in the background under bullet point 1, add renewable before the word permit. I think it's important that any permit process allow for renewability. We know that people are going to be here for a long time, and we have this crisis that is ongoing. And that should be reflected also in the letter. So renewable before permit in both the background and the letter. At the end of that paragraph, I would add that we heard from one of the speakers that we already have families who have left. And those people, just because they left, should not be locked out of the system. So I think it's important that we include, after the parentheses that talks about the different categories of people that we need to prioritize, after that, I would add, this should include people meeting these criteria who have been living in RVs in Berkeley but were forced to move. And then finally, I would add at the top of the letter where it says, Dear Berkeley City Council, I would say, Dear Berkeley City Council and City Manager D. Williams Ridley, comma. Other than that, I just wanted to say, I don't think this is watering it down. I think this is making it more productive. The council twice had an item before them to ban RVs, and they voted for it twice. And the second time it was better, but it wasn't perfect, and it certainly, I advocated that they not vote for it. My council member voted against it. But the reality is the council supported the ban. And I want the thing that is most important to me is maximizing good outcomes. And if we can make sure that if we are unsuccessful in persuading the council to overturn this ban, that the outcome is as just and as equitable as possible, I think that's the most important thing to do. So that's why I support this alternative. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Solosky.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank all the folks who came to speak tonight. I want to thank Mayor Arreguín for some of your explanations and for your concern, your obvious concern. I want to thank my fellow board members here tonight, because I think this is not an easy thing for us to deal with. There are various points of view, and some of them are nuanced, some of them are not. Personally, I really think we should just make a statement. This is not our decision. Council's going to do what council is going to do. I think this was, as the mayor himself suggested, a rash move by council. In many ways, they've put the cart before the horse. First, in building a policy, you get some of your resources together, you figure out what the real needs are, you do an assessment. To start with the threat of imposing a ban on certain activities that are ongoing in the city seems to me the wrong way to start. And I think the council should start all over, quite honestly. Let's start from the beginning and do it right this time. That would be my suggestion. One humble citizen, one humble rent board commissioner. I'm going to vote against the substitute, and I am going to support the original motion. Thank you.
Commissioner Simon Weisberg.
I too want to appreciate the commissioners that brought this issue forward. I am actually, though, leaning towards the substitute motion. And frankly, because, well, first, if I really want us to focus on putting this in front of the city manager, and I think we can do both of those, but I think that we are going to have a stronger statement, particularly when this letter goes out to other institutions, when we're being really specific, because I think that then it actually shows that we're participating in what the actual conversation is. I actually agree that that I don't think that there's this huge difference, and I think it's going to be really meaningful that we're unanimous in when we vote. So I hope that folks will consider taking that into consideration. In both of them, we are saying this is not acceptable. I think the second one is, and the reason I'm wanting to go in that direction is that it's being very specific about what we want changed. And I think that that is going to push the conversation forward. And in my experience, when we really are, and I actually don't agree that the council is going to do what council does. I think that this matters. Not only are we being recorded in our usual way, but obviously we have television here tonight, and I think people are watching. I know that when I was at council in Oakland recently, several people came up to me and asked me about this. I do think that it's important for us to be engaging in the actual specifics, and I think anytime you have government regulation, you need to have specific rules, and I think we're saying not only should it happen, but it should happen in this way. I don't think we're saying that if anybody who is traveling here on vacation should get to have access to these things. We're saying as part of our, housing crisis that we are providing these for our community members. And I think that that's what it's saying. It's not saying that this is new places that people can now Airbnb RVs that they're going to put out there to vacationers. And I think so it's important to put that there. And I think it allows us to include the additional resources. I also think that it's important, and I say this at the when I'm on the hack, that it's one thing for us to do this, but I also think it's really important that we go to council when this comes up next. And that it's, and I think last year when we had things on, we had items that were going to be put on the ballot, there were some of us who were there for the vote and some of us who weren't. And I think that it's really important not only what we talk about here, but if we are seeing ourselves as representing tenants, we see a role in trying to address the affordability crisis, that we also, we need to be there to express our support for the legislation. I usually don't talk so long, so I'll stop there. But I think both of them say this is unacceptable. Berkeley is not going to have a situation where people have to move 2 hours. I'd also say that the program in Oakland, people are only allowed to stay there one night at a time. So I hope that if we do it, we're able to create a program where people can stay there more permanently. So that's another, hopefully we can improve upon what Oakland has done with the faith community. And I also want to say, we want to encourage the faith community, not just the churches. I hope that we have many synagogues in this town, and I'm, feel a little bit ashamed that none of the synagogues came forward either. So I hope that we can, everyone needs to participate in solving this. Oh, I think that the main, well, I wanted to cut the line, though we understand that the site of homelessness in general, I want to cut that line, which is in the third paragraph down, page 2. I just think we should cut that. I understand what the intention may have been, but I feel like it's, that'd be okay?
I'm friendly to that, and also all of Commissioner Alpert's amendments.
And I'm not sure if this can be finessed when the chair is, if this one is passed, if the chair, when is signing it. Just that I think the sentiment that Commissioner Alpert put out, that there shouldn't be any, like if someone isn't, there shouldn't be any punitive tools. I mean, I think you said that in your comments, but you weren't specific in terms of how we would alter that. So I'm not sure. And that would, not if someone's using it for Airbnb, obviously, but if, well, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to be more specific.
Maybe just instead of, we could replace the word replace with the word remove, and just say remove the current proposal of penalizing RV or camper dwellers out of compliance with the proposed ordinance, period.
Yep.
Quick question, just a clarification on the motion. You said page 2. Can you be more specific about which paragraph you're talking about?
Oh, this is on when it itemizes elements 1 through 4. This is suggestion 2.
Okay, so, and if you could just repeat that last modification?
Yeah, and it will be in both the background and also in the letter, same modification. Instead of what number 2 says now, just strike it all and replace with remove the current proposal of penalizing RV or camper dwellers out of compliance with the proposed ordinance, period.
Could I suggest through the receipt of an infraction? Because it's specifically their infraction that's the big problem.
Oh, yeah, sorry, thank you. Through receipt of an infraction, period. That's where we wanted to put the period.
Can I also just, where are we at with who the letter would go to? It sounds like we've talked, obviously, city manager, Supervisor Carson. What about our state representatives who could be addressing the issue of the State Lands Commission? I understand that there are members on the commission, but also, I mean, if you're worrying about, I don't see how this is not as important as CASA in terms of addressing it. So I think it should go to both our assembly member and our state senator.
I'm friendly to that.
So then could I just clarify? So the letter is Dear Berkeley City Council and City Manager Dee Williams Ridley. And at the bottom, if we can have it be CC'd to Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, Senator Nancy Skinner, and also maybe Controller Betty Yee, because I think she's on the State Lands Commission, correct?
And I would include Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis as well. She's a second member of the State Lands Commission.
And then Supervisor Keith Carson.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, why don't we send it to our Representative Barbara Lee, because one of the issues we heard is that the federal government isn't providing us any money and isn't providing. So I would like to see the Barbara Lee also addressed in this and let her know about the issue.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Poblet.
As far as I can tell, the key specifics of if the city council cannot see clear to rescinding are in both letters, and I'm supportive of something actionable. So I don't know if somebody could clarify that.
So the specifics are only in the alternate letter. The two different letters you have before you are the track change version and the accepted version. So they're the same letter.
Those two are the same thing.
Thank you.
Is that it? Any other comment, Commissioner?
Are we going to go to a vote? If
So
there's no
we
more?
have a substitute motion on right now. So if we had several amendments, I don't know if
I wanted to speak again.
Well, I want to speak again, assuming that we're ready, assuming we're close to a vote.
You haven't spoken yet.
Yes.
so you haven't spoken yet, so Commissioner Chan.
Correct. Okay. So I am actually very uncomfortable voting on both of the things that is being presented today. And I just want to make it very clear that I am speaking as my own capacity as a Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board Commissioner. You know, I understand that the RV ban is a very strong action, and I do not take this vote very lightly. But, you know, I have to make sure that the decisions that we make take into the consideration of the well-being of the whole community into account. And also, I have to be fiscally responsible and consider how much it is appropriate for the city to spend in helping RV inhabitants, many of whom are have source of incomes and the withdrawal to procure an RV. And the reality is that we have to consider whether or not it's fair to divert funds that would otherwise go to help homeless individuals who might, let's say, suffer from mental illness or family need. The reality is that we are increasing spending on homelessness, and I will continue to support that. I would also continue to advocate on a county level to support that as well. You know, the reality is that this is the reason why we actually need to create a permitting system to ensure equitable use of city resources. The council did vote to explicitly delay any enforcement until a permitting system is in place, and the council has exempted families, seniors, persons with disabilities, students, and people who have been displaced from Berkeley or have ties to the community. Just like how the council decision did feel rushed, I feel like the way, if we decide to push either of these things forward, would be, in a way, rushing the process as well. I will, in hopes, whether or not whatever gets passed, I hope that I will have the opportunity to work with the chair and/or the mayor to send a letter to specifically focus on the use of the waterfront to either Controller Yi or Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. And the final thing I will say is that I understand that, you know, some of you would have liked to be on the 4x4, but the reality is that something like this could be taken on by the 4x4 through a discussion. And the other thing is that we could find alternative solutions through the Section 8 committee. So these are just things that I hope that we could do and that we could really think about. So I don't feel comfortable right now with voting for it, but I definitely look forward to hearing more discussion.
Okay, then Commissioner Sotovejil, short, please.
Yes, I want a unanimous decision too. The way the second motion, or the second, the substitute motion is currently expressed, I would not support it. I think there is some common ground in your letter to the council that could get me to vote for the substitute, okay? Is where we don't ask them to respectfully rescind or suspend, we request them to rescind, which is in your letter. And that rather than, in that intro paragraph about your 4 bullet points saying, we're the all-knowing rent board, city council, listen to us because this is gonna make more of a difference when you negotiate with the city manager, those 4 bullet points. Rather than saying, if you don't see it clear, we just say, we recommend that you do this right now. So we say you rescind it, and these are the actions that you do to support the RV community.
Is this a friendly amendment
With the exception of number 1, which is the permitting process. Because effectively, what that does is say, hey, whoever's here now okay, if you could prove certain things, then you can stay here. But the rest of you, you're criminal because you're poor, basically, right? I mean, it is. And so I would say I'm okay with your letter on that and supporting it so we get unanimous, but you strike number 1 about the permitting process. And also number 2, we don't want administrative citations. And the other ones, I think I'm fine with. I think that sounds good. And as we've been contentious in the last several meetings, I don't want to be that. This is not about us. This is about the community. And we need to stand strong together as a unified force. And I'm willing to support your motion and say, okay, whatever, mine, it's not me. It's about moving something forward. And I think all of us can agree on that. I hear us expressing that. And so let's do that.
So are these 2 friendly amendments, did I hear?
Possibly. I'm just trying to understand what you're proposing. I appreciate the sentiment. Are you asking that we do not include a request to immediately implement a longer-term permitting system, or that we remove the proposal of penalizing RV dwellers?
Yes, strike 1 and 2 because they're irrelevant if you're asking for a rescission. I think that's correct. So yes, and I'm trying to make a compromise here, and I'd like to send it to the school board and ask them to weigh in on this issue too, because if the 2 other governing bodies in this jurisdiction can say to the council, we want you to rescind it, that's a lot more powerful than this board, which they historically have always neglected or failed to care about what we had to say.
If I might.
So I'd like to hear more discussion, but I'm totally fine sending this to the school board either through CC in the letter or
No, asking them to weigh in.
Sure. That's fine. They're already working on this, but we can ask them to weigh in a different way. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I think I'm fine with your initial proposal to remove, so just say rescind this or do this.
No, it's rescind this, and you need to do this, which is whatever 2 or 3 and 4 say.
Rescind this and do this. The part that I am not comfortable with, unless, because I do want to pass something tonight, I hear consensus that that is the desire of the board. Removing 1 and 2, those are 2 of the items Councilmember Harrison said would be most helpful to her as a fighter for those who are stuck in the crosshairs of this criminal or this proposal to criminalize RV dwellers. So I want to make sure that she and progressives on the council like her have all the tools and support they need. Those 2 proposals were worked out in conversation with her. Is there an opportunity to come to some consensus here?
I love Councilmember Kate Harrison for a lot of things, but she hadn't articulated that in front of this board, and I trust that you had that conversation with her. But this is under the assumption that there's our RV ban, and I don't think we should do a permitting process under the assumption of an RV ban. That's how this is written. So I don't want to sit here and go through it right now and modify it. Let's just kick it out and ask or let the council do what they're going to do to the city manager who is inactive on what their requests are anyway. So it really is not going to help Kate Harrison. It's not.
Well,
city manager doesn't listen to them. Why would she listen to us? Right?
Sure.
I'd like to hear more discussion from the board. I'm open to considering it if that is what a consensus or at least a majority of the board would also support.
Okay, 1 second. So Commissioner Poblet, and then I'm going to send it over to Commissioner Alper, and then I think I'm going to call to question. Okay?
I think this is more on that. I'm happy to.
So I just wanted to clarify, because I also have to be friendly. So I'm totally friendly to striking in the letter a suspension and just say agenda the rescission. So if we strike on page 1, 2, 3, 4, in the first paragraph, the Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board respectfully requests that you place on your next regular city council agenda the rescission of ordinance number. And then I'm perfectly happy to CC the school board. I'm not friendly to removing 1 or 2.
Commissioner Poblet?
I feel it's important for us to take action on this. The housing crisis is enormous, and it's hard to deal with from a small city and our small government place that we have, and I appreciate the efforts that people are making for it to make things better. And in the meantime, to put the burden on the people most impacted by that crisis is unconscionable. I think that maybe we could consider having the amendments Commissioner Soto-Vigil proposed, and then after that saying, and if a path is not possible, these are 2, I don't know what we would call them, harm reduction possibilities that we urge you to consider. I do think that they should rescind it, and if the mayor himself said it was hasty, and if there's so much public opposition to it, I don't think we should back down from saying that they should rescind it, and we should do everything in our power to have them rescind it. And also, they did pass it, so they need to be held accountable for passing it. And if getting an example of how to be slightly less draconian about being draconian would be helpful to somebody in the middle of the road, then take that. That's fine. But actually what we need for them to do is to understand that we oppose this ban because of what it's going to do to our community and because of how it's punishing those worst impacted by the housing crisis.
So can I respond to that as well? If that's an amendment to make.
If that's, well, I'm actually, I haven't spoken yet, but.
Yeah, sorry.
So I am actually in favor of removing items 1 and 2 on this, because we are asking, it says examples of such changes include directing the city manager to, 3, work with the Berkeley's Unified School District, State Lands Commission, Berkeley neighbors, and other stakeholders to identify lots that could serve as available parking sites. And 4, regularly and transparently share with the City Council, Health, Life, and Enrichment communities, the full City Council, affected community, and members of the public, what measures shall be and are being taken to ensure that robust outreach and services have been and will continue to be provided to the at-risk and housing insecure populations that shall be impacted by this ordinance. 1, to me, though, is very, very specific. It seems to me that if you don't live in Berkeley, you know, that you can't be here. And I find that problematic because, I mean, this is an issue for the whole Bay Area region. And so this just says, well, if you're Berkeley and you have connections to Berkeley, you know, you're the only ones who could be here. And I find that problematic. I'm sorry. And then also replace the current proposal of penalizing RVs. So I agree with Commissioner Soto-Vigil. Let's send this mayor this letter to all the places we were suggesting sending them to, and remove items 1 and 2. It's true. We want to send a strong letter to the City Council. Yes, it is the city manager's decision, and so there's not much more we can do. So. So I was going to call to question, but Commissioner Solosky.
Very quick. Yes, I agree with the chair's analysis. I will vote for the substitute motion if 1 and 2 are stricken. I do find it problematic. I appreciate the school district's efforts to work toward getting families in the district a place where they can stay, but there's a whole array of folks out there that are not families in the district. We're leaving, I mean, this list includes many people, but it doesn't include all people. And I have the same issues that Chair Laverde again, this is a complicated issue, but I really think we're trying to do too much tonight in many ways. Let's keep the statement simple. Let's tell council and others what we would like to see happen. And then in the next steps, if we can come back and do the next steps next month or whenever. We'll have opportunities. I don't believe this is going to go away in the immediate future. So let's do something tonight, and I will vote for the substitute if 1 and 2 are stricken, just so folks know, if we want some kind of, consensus here. Thank you.
Okay, I know I threatened to call the question, but Commissioner Murphy has not spoken yet, so I'm going to let her speak.
So I support the motion for it to be rescinded, and I will support the substitute if 1 and 2 is removed too, because I feel like if we don't remove 1 and 2, we'll be compromising. And we're at the place now in Berkeley where we need to start making a stand. We've been compromising way too long, and it's time to take a stand. Thank you.
Chair?
Yes, so Commissioners Simon Weisberg and then Alpert, and then after Commissioner Alpert, everyone's had a chance to speak a couple times. We're calling the question.
Okay, so I want to make an attempt to get, I think we're maybe getting closer to something we can all agree on. I like the idea of it just saying rescission instead of the or. Seems like we're getting consensus on that. What I wanted to propose on the 1 and 2 is that because we're going with, it seems like we all agree that the first thing is it should be rescinded. If somehow we're not there, then we're providing some specifics. And then in the specifics, the reason I would say to keep 1, but basically end it at the end of the second sentence. So it would read, immediately implement a longer term with the changes that Commissioner Alpert had suggested, and then permit for RVs and campers, period. And then we would take out the restrictive qualifications. And then on number 2, the reason I think we should actually keep it is, and I think what's hard is obviously we're looking not at the changes that Commissioner Alpert had proposed. Actually, I don't know who proposed it, but I believe it was a friendly amendment to basically say to replace the current proposal of penalizing. So I think we want to keep the part that we're not saying just do a kind of lesser punishment, we're just saying no punishment. So I don't know if that gets to the same place that folks are trying to get to by saying, the problems with 1 and 2. Does that, yeah.
But it don't say no, it say less.
On the microphone.
Right, but
So what confused me for number 2 is that it don't say no, it say less. That still means some type of something.
We struck that in the friendly amendment.
There was a friendly amendment to change it, and I think because it's not written down, we're forgetting about it.
It's been repealed and replaced.
If I could.
Okay, so Commissioner Alpert, and then we're calling the question.
So in order to achieve consensus, I think what we can do is say, someone had suggested moving paragraphs number 3.
Are you building on what I said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving paragraphs 3 and 4, just as we should do these regardless. I believe that was what Commissioner Sotomayor had said, was that we should do 3 and 4 regardless of whether it's rescinded or not. I agree. So if we can move section 3 and 4 after the paragraph that ends, we cannot stand by without voicing our opposition to this ordinance. So remove them as bullets and say, further, we encourage the council to work with the Berkeley Unified School District, and then that paragraph. And after that paragraph, say, also, the council should regularly and transparently. And so that way, those 2 are incorporated as items regardless. So that goes after, we cannot stand by without voicing our opposition.
Council and manager.
Council and manager. And then, And then for item 1, it would say if the city council cannot see clear to rescind, and then also we should strike or direct the city manager not to implement, because we're just saying rescind. Then it would say, we recommend that prior to implementation, changes be put in place, yada, yada. And then in item 1, strike everything in the parentheses until the end of the parentheses, and then keep, this should include people who have left already, because that's not restrictive, it's actually expansive. And then in item 2, we've already stricken everything up until receipt of an infraction. So at that point, all we're saying is make sure that it's long-term renewable and that people who have already left can come, and make sure that they're not punished. I believe that achieves everything that everyone had achieved. I'm seeing no.
No, we need to be simple on this. That's very complicated, what you just said, and I'm not following it on this language. Because there's been so many strikeouts on this letter. And I think that if we're asking for a permitting system and language like, well, if you don't see it clear to rescind, it's still the same point, is that we're still supporting the ban. If you say, if you still don't see it's clear to rescind, that means we're still supporting a ban and do A, B, and C. That's what that's saying. That's absolutely what it's saying.
I just wanted to reinforce something Commissioner Solowski said earlier, which is if they don't see it clear to rescind, we will have another opportunity to weigh in. So we could, on the details, go in on some of the details. If it seems like there's not going to be a path to rescind, we'll be able to talk about this again, write another letter about if they're going to do a permitting system, this is one,
yes,
our opinions on what a more humane one might be.
I'd like to ask for a straw poll, if possible. It's non-binding. I would just like to see who would support this simpler version.
Which simpler?
Well, first of all,
The one that strikes 1 and 2.
the one that's striking
in their
1 and 2?
entirety. Yeah.
We could do a straw poll.
That's fine.
5, okay. You are the magic 5th then. So I am friendly to striking 1 and 2 in their entirety.
Thank you.
Are we also striking the paragraph before them if city council cannot?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
So, Amy, could you kind of, we're going to be voting on this friendly amendment, so if you can take a deep breath and read what we're going to be voting
You want me
on.
to restate?
All right, so unless the mover or the seconder would prefer to do this for me, I'm going to attempt to synopsize what I think we just agreed on in terms of the motion, to make it clear. So this is the substitute motion with a friendly amendment by Soto Vigil to strike items 1 and 2 on the second page and also correspondingly in the attached letter, to delete the paragraph that precedes item 1 that begins with if the city council cannot see clear. And what I need clarification on are the suggestions about the various assembly members and Controller Betty Yee copying. I'm not clear on whether or not that was accepted.
Okay.
Not Ben Carson, Keith Carson.
Would you like me to list the ones that I have?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, so we are addressing the letter to the Berkeley City Council and City Manager D. Williams Ridley. We are copying it to Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, Assemblymember Nancy Skinner, Controller Betty Yee, Supervisor Keith Carson, and Representative Barbara Lee. Is that correct?
And the Berkeley School Board.
Oh, and the Berkeley School Board, thank you. Okay. And we are changing the letter to delete the, instead of saying rescission or suspension of, just the rescission of.
Yes.
Does that pretty much capture?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
And
that's the
then
substitute
there's-
motion as I
yeah.
understand it.
Okay.
If there's,
Yeah,
So
and then
what-
we struck the sentence that starts with "though we understand," but in the 3rd paragraph, but I think you got that already.
wait, let me make sure I did. In the 3rd paragraph of the letter,
Of the background.
oh, the background, sorry, 1 sec. I did not get that.
So it's striking "though we understand" all the way to residents.
And what, what paragraph is that on the first page?
On page 2,
Oh.
paragraph 1, 2, 3.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so is everyone clear? Okay,
Yes.
so let's take a voice call.
Can I say something? So, yeah, so I just want to once again state that I will be, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I will once again state that, I will be voting no on this, and I just want to say that I'm very uncomfortable because I don't feel like we've had an actual robust conversation about the actual reason why the RV ban happened in the first place, and therefore I don't feel comfortable voting for this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's do a roll call.
Roll call vote on the substitute motion. Commissioner Alpert.
Aye.
Cheng.
No.
Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you. Poblet.
Yes.
Solosky.
Yes.
Simon Weisberg.
Yes. Yes.
Sotomayor.
Yes.
Tregu.
Yes.
Laverde.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Love
Great.
you guys.
So I would like to take a break right now, please.
Please, for the captioner.
Yes,
So
thank you.
microphone's off.
Yes, so 5 minutes.
That was a good fight, man. You know how to fight. you got no bruises on them knuckles. I do. You didn't see how you was bobbing and weaving that? He was. That was good. I like that stuff.
Wait, it's over or is it a
I wish it was over.
You and me both.
It's not even halfway, man.
Really?
Yes. You know all that was? That was one agenda item. Yeah, because people talk a lot.
That was a lot.
We'll have other fights. Can't win them all, right? I thought it was like Papa West.
I think of the summer was at the beginning. Oh, my God. I mean, I was fumbling, but I think it did good. Thank you. How was your dinner?
I mean, the thing is, I think it would have made us. I think it would have had more enough, it just would have made the time way too long. I think
That's his MO. That's his MO. So he has no record.
Do you need to speak? Want the microphone? Or no.
I think it was a good apple.
Oh, okay. Not us, okay. What I was doing earlier, I Okay, yeah.
You know whose glasses these are?
No, they were here when I got here. So this room is easy.
Oh,
I'm not sure. I was trying.
I was just saying, let's get to vote and do it as soon as possible, and they did that, so that was good. Yeah, I know, I thought with all the amendments and backtracking, but it worked, I think.
It did.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it was really impressive, actually, it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for my card.
Yeah, I totally blanked. I'm sorry. I told myself I was speaking. I want you speaking. We can wait.
5 minutes, I'll go pee.
And by the way, this is not a personal capitalistic thing. I did not know there were.
I wonder how we can find out.
Somebody sent an email to their front desk. I sent an email to Berkeley side, Daily Calendar. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're asking very close.
James, you broke my heart.
He's a heartbreaker.
I would have abstained, but then Leah would say I was weak, so.
I thought the rule was to never abstain.
That's why I didn't abstain.
Leah, what are you working on? Being a chair?
Chair?
Is that what you're working on next? Being a city council in the chair? Because I see you running this meeting tonight. It's called board support. We're supposed to be board supporting each other.
I need a computer in order to do my work.
Yeah.
No, don't put Chinese under it. Actually, you want to know something about choices? So I'm wrong. These are. They try home every day for like they try homework, so I just came.
Leah, we need to have company more often. Because we act right in front of kids and company. We need to bring them. They were at first. I remember the ones on Alcatraz stepped up. Remember they stepped up and said they were going to use their parking lot for the tiny homes? I think people
I don't
are
want to feel bad about
discouraged.
cutting down a tree, so I'll give it
They're
back.
discouraged to come out because they feel like their voice is not being heard anyway.
No, but then I had them on me.
Not here, I'm talking about in general. At the, yeah.
You can.
But what's the
it's
deal
big
with
shoulders.
the mayor throwing the city manager under the bus like that? But at first, before he was mayor and it was Tom Banks, it was a lot of pushback on her. It was like disrespecting her, mistreating her, and all that. So she had to like stand up and be strong. And now her standing up, being strong is making her, yes. I had many conversations with her. She was talking, and we talked about, yeah. And so now it's different, and now it's like coming off like she's not doing her part. Now she needs to be evaluated.
I found you. Let me see, because I thought I had it.
That's okay. I've got it if you need it.
Yeah, let me borrow because I can't find it. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Oh, here it is. My appeal.
Look at you.
With my little eyeballs.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting back to order.
All council members on the phone, you're at a conference. No, we have
Whatever happened with the proclamation?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Okay, so now we are going to our appeal item on the agenda. And I've just lost my agenda. Where is it? Where is it? Let me buy the agenda. Okay. So we have an appeal. It's case E92-2504 Dana Street, units A, B, and C. So we will ask the petitioner to please come forward. Good evening. Can you please identify yourself? Okay, great. So before we start, we're going to have the first the legal staff give us a summary of the case, and then you're going to have 7 minutes to speak about your item. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. This appeal presents an almost identical fact pattern to the petition E91, which you heard last month. The board should apply the law in the same way that it did in that case, which resulted in the exemption of one of the 3 units in a converted triplex, because that unit was substantially comprised of new residential space, whereas the other 2 units were created by remodeling and subdividing existing residential space. 2504 Dana Street was a large single-family home that was operated as a rooming house prior to landlord's acquisition of the property. In 2012, the landlord applied for a zoning permit to convert the building into a triplex and began renting the units in August of 2013. The conversion created a new unit, Unit C, by raising the roof to create additional residential space in the attic and subdivided the lower levels into Units A and B. In May 11, 2017, staff attorney Matthew Siegel issued an administrative determination that the property is not exempt because the units were created from existing residential space. He cited Burien LLC v. Wiley and a case interpreting the Costa-Hawkins new construction exemption. Burien held that the certificate of occupancy that results from the conversion of one type of residential use to another does not receive exemptions from rent control. On appeal, the landlord argues that the board should ignore the Burien case and interpret Costa-Hawkins more broadly. The landlord claims that the board has no jurisdiction to interpret the applicability of the new construction exemption, that the legal authority relied upon by the hearing examiner is inapplicable to the facts of this case, and the decision was has impermissible retroactive effect. The arguments misconstrue the law and the legal effect of board action. By the way, a lot of this you heard last month, but the appeals are so similar that I'm going to repeat it for purposes of creating a record that you all heard. You all heard the legal staff's recommendation on this. Essentially, appellant would have you believe that the rent board has no authority to ever interpret Costa-Hawkins. This simply can't be so. Remember, the Costa-Hawkins as a law has no independent authority other than to provide limitations on the way that jurisdictions are able to implement rent control. It is a law that circumscribes municipalities' abilities to impose controls on rents. Nowhere in the law is there a specific reference to any one city. This is just a set of rules that bind rent control jurisdictions. The board literally must interpret Costa-Hawkins in every single hearing because Costa-Hawkins eliminated broad swaths of the ordinance. First, the board certainly has the authority to interpret the exemptions from the ordinance. That is the most fundamental aspect of determining whether or not the board has the ability to proceed with imposing rent ceilings and adjustments. Second, the legal conclusions in the Burien case are not narrowly tailored to apply only to condominiums. The court held that the purpose of Costa-Hawkins exemption for new construction is to encourage the creation of units that enlarge the housing supply. Unit C enlarged the housing supply, and units A and B merely reconfigured an existing residential rooming house. Therefore, we believe the hearing examiner should have exempted unit C to achieve the result required by Burien, and to be consistent with the prior decision that you all reached last month in petition E91. Third, appellants introduced the novel approach of, quote, countable integers as the method for evaluating whether a project enlarges the housing supply with zero legal authority. The units in Burien and Da Vinci were, quote, units, but courts upheld those cities' determinations that those certificates of occupancy weren't indicative of new housing supply. Appellant would have you ignore Burien and Da Vinci on the theory that the facts are distinguishable. However, as we laid out on page 6 of the recommendation, the facts of the cases are actually quite similar. Reliance on the Palmer case by the appellants is misplaced. The legislature acted to supersede Palmer because it was overly strict in interpreting Costa-Hawkins. It has no precedential value. Fourth, appellants argue that the application of Regulation 510 to this property might somehow lead to a different result. This argument is completely without merit. The title of Regulation 510 is Definition of New Construction for Units that Lack a Certificate of Occupancy. And the regulation plainly states that it deals with certain newly constructed rental units for which a certificate of occupancy has not been issued. This property has a certificate of occupancy, so Regulation 510 simply does not apply. Lastly, nothing about the decision applies retroactively. Rent control applies going forward, not back to when the unit was originally converted. Laws change, and the units may be subject to new regulations when they do. The hearing examiner correctly determined that units A and B are not exempt from the rent ordinance. However, we believe unit C was created from uninhabitable space in the attic, and therefore the board should modify the decision to exempt unit C, consistent with your decision in petition E91 that you reached last month. Thank you.
Thank you. The appellant will now have first 5 minutes. Go ahead. Thank you. No, actually, you have 7 minutes because, so go ahead.
I don't need that much time, but thank you anyways. While we do appreciate the acknowledgement that the decision was wrong as to one of the 3 units, we believe it was also wrong as to the others. Okay, we believe it was also wrong as to the others. This case does concern the property at 2504 Dana Street, which was prior to the ownership by the current owner, NCR Properties, categorized by both the Zoning Adjustment Board and the Building and Safety Division as substandard, incapable of being occupied. It was vacant, it was dilapidated, and it was the subject of numerous notices of violation. The owner at that point in time had 2 choices. Could have returned the property to its last legal use as a single-family residence, or it could have attempted to convert it into a multi-unit property. To best serve the interests of the community, the nearby university, and to increase the stock of residential housing supply, the owner elected to attempt to convert it to a multi-unit property. It is worth stopping here to consider what would have happened had the owner elected the alternative. Had the owner restored the property to its last legal use as a single-family residence, it would have been a property entirely exempt from rent limitations. This exemption exists as a matter of that same law that Mr. Brown was just talking about, the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. It's not questioned or challenged as part of the staff recommendation. That is the law. That was a viable option available to this owner. Had the owner restored the property to use as that single-family residence, it would have reduced the stock of residential housing supply. Records from the past showed that that single-family residence previously contained somewhere between 5 and 10 bedrooms. Instead, as I said, the owner elected to pursue the conversion of the property to a triplex. In opposing that effort, the Rent Board's executive director opined that since the proposed conversion requires the issuance of a new certificate of occupancy, the approval of that application would result in the creation of 3 new units that are exempt from rent stabilization per Berkeley Municipal Code Section 1376050, thereby resulting in the elimination of rental units. Now, Mr. Brown takes the opposite position, but in any event, in pursuing the conversion, the owner understood and reasonably relied on such representations that were made to him by the Rent Board's executive director. It did so at the expense of pursuing the creation of a lawful single-family residence, which would have also been exempt from rent stabilization. Now, when that decision and that election has become irreversible, it is apparently the position of the board's legal staff that the units are not exempt. This position is supposedly based on a literal reading of a case called Burien v. Wiley. We don't suggest that you ignore that case. We just say that that case is not applicable to the present case. Burien v. Wiley was a case involving a rent-controlled property, distinct from the present one, containing occupied rent-controlled units, also distinct from the present one. The owner in that case, as a means of trying to escape rent control, applied and was successful in converting those units to condominiums. That owner was not successful, however, in avoiding rent control because the court in Burien noted that a couple things were true. First, the acts of the owner had not added to the residential housing supply. Second, the configuration, its number of units, was the same before and after the conversion. And third, it was effectively nothing more than a paperwork conversion, where the owner filed some paperwork and was not trying to sneakily avoid rent control. So the outcome in that case was as expected. Conversely here, the property owner did advance the goal of adding to the residential housing supply. It took a single-family resident and made 3 new units, not 1 new unit, not Unit C, but Unit A, Unit B, and Unit C. It turned a property of questionable and substandard use into one with 19 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 2,000 square feet of entirely new space, and a property now capable of housing approximately 35 individuals. This case, as 180 degrees from the case in Burien, serves the goal of adding to the residential housing supply. To the extent that Burien has bearing on the case, it supports the conclusion that the exemption should apply to all of the units. At the law, there are things called maxims of jurisprudence. Maxims of jurisprudence are ways that we try to assist ourselves in applying the law. One of the maxims is if the reason is the same, the rule should be the same. And in this case, we have an instance where Burien is being applied to Dana. And we have different reasons, clearly different circumstances, and yet the rule is the same. That is not how the law is to be interpreted. The staff recommendation is also flawed insofar as it isolates a portion of this property as supposed new construction while deeming the balance to be pre-existing. The distinction it attempts to draw there is that if residential use existed in part of the space, it is not exempt and vice versa. This approach is flawed because it leads to an entirely unworkable and entirely gray area of what are and are not exempt units. By way of example, is a unit exempt if the lawful use is commercial but illegal rental use, residential use is made? There's no clear answer to that, and that would be the result from this rule that's being proposed here. The recommendation points to the fact that the property contains roughly 28% more residential square footage than before. Does 10 feet of additional square footage, is that enough? Is there a threshold amount? None of these rules exist as a matter of Costa-Hawkins, and none of these rules should be applied in through the Rent Board's rules here. Conversely, Costa-Hawkins sets forth a bright line rule where there is a certificate of occupancy that is issued, the resulting units are exempt. It does not require consideration of residential use, non-residential use, percentage increases, or anything like that. It's a simple, easy standard to evaluate. Burien did not alter this rule. In fact, the words prior to residential use, prior to commercial use, none of that stuff exists in Costa-Hawkins. Lastly, the policy behind this decision is a dangerous one. Costa-Hawkins may not be popular insofar as it's viewed as a affront to rent control. But there are and will be other properties, like we heard about a month ago, like Dana Street and like Waring Street. In fact, we had that one a month ago. If Berkeley's interpretations of these rules is that conversions of prior single-family residence to duplex, triplex, bigger, newer properties defeats the exempt status, owners will not pursue these conversions. This will have the opposite effect of what Costa-Hawkins intended, and the opposite effect of what Berkeley should be promoting. The decision should be modified, and all 3 units should be determined to be exempt based on the new certificate of occupancy that was issued for all 3 units in 2014. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I first wanted to be clear on something that I think I heard you say, asserting that the present owner could have, if he wanted to, created a single-family home. Is that accurate?
Yes, that was the last legal use of the property.
So my question is, in that scenario, how many separate lease agreements would he have envisioned renting to?
Well, typically in a single-family residence that's used as a single-family residence, there's 1 lease agreement.
Pardon me. In this case, the immediately preceding use was actually as a rooming house. So the typical usage that Mr. Friedman describes, I won't dispute, but was not the usage either in this property nor the Waring Street property that you saw last month. The landlord was individually contracting with tenants to rent rooms in a very large residential property.
Thank you. And so that gets to the heart of the question I was going to ask next. I direct you to the zoning board, the City of Berkeley Municipal Code definition, and also the rent board definition of a rooming house, a building other than a hotel where lodging for 5 or more persons is provided for compensation, whether direct or indirect. What would have been the distinction between the previous use as a rooming house and the present use had the owner gone the single-family home route?
Well, the previous use as a rooming house use was, as far as everyone can tell, all the records show, was illegal. It was not a legal use as a rooming house. The property at that point, when this owner acquired the property, was vacant. So had this owner pursued its legal use as a single-family residence, the use that it would have pursued would have been a single lease for the use of the entire property by a number of occupants.
Thank you.
Can I shed a little bit of light on that? Mr. Friedman brings up a good point about the legality of the use. This is one of the areas where the planning code and the rent ordinance have some disharmony. So while it might have been illegal according to the planning code, it was absolutely not illegal according to the rent ordinance. And the commissioners tonight are here to look at rent ordinance issues and not planning code issues.
Commissioner Alpert.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm not particularly concerned with what could have been. I'm concerned with what is, right? And what we know is that pursuant to the standard we set in the previous case, that if the use had been housing and it continues to be housing, then rent control applies. And that if there is new space generated that had not been habitable before, that rent control should not apply. So consistent with our previous ruling, I would move to adopt staff recommendation.
And I'll second.
And exempt the 1 unit and continue to keep what would the correct language be?
If you just adopt the staff recommendation, it'll incorporate the exemption of Unit C and the coverage of Units A and B.
Okay. Then adopt staff's recommendation.
And then I'll second that, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
We should take a roll call.
Okay, well, so then let's take a roll call.
To adopt the staff recommendation, Commissioner Alpert.
Aye.
Chang? Murphy?
Yes.
Pablet?
Yes.
Pablet?
Yes.
Solosky?
Yes.
Simon Weisberg?
Yes.
Sotoville?
Yes.
Tregu?
Yes.
Laverde?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now let's move back to our action items. Action item, we're going back to item 6A1, recommendation to adopt Resolution 1908, setting the fiscal year 2019-20 annual registration fee due July 1st, 2019, and Resolution 1909, authorizing the pass-through of a portion of the registration fee to certain tenants. We have a report from the Executive Director.
I can deliver this, or it can come from the Budget Committee. What's the committee's preference? Would
The
you like
chair
me
of the
to go ahead?
committee?
Okay.
Does the chair?
Sure.
Before I start, just a point of order, I am the only person that pulled it. Can I just state why I pulled it? And assuming nobody else has questions, do we need to actually discuss this? Because I just have a point, I just wanted to say something.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you correctly.
I literally just wanted to say something. That's why I pulled the item. If people want to hear the presentation, that's fine. I don't need to hear the presentation. I just wanted to be able to speak on it.
Oh, that's right, you did. So
Yeah.
what would you like to speak about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a little concerned, and maybe you can just answer the question, Chair Tragub, Finance Chair Tragub. So, going into the budgeting process, I am always very concerned as a chair of another committee that I have the ability to make financial asks. For example, a couple of years ago, I was extremely insistent on making the financial ask for the social media, and I guess maybe I was given proper notice, or I just gave myself proper notice and was very aggressive. So I just kind of wanted to know if we were to set this as, continuing the same fee, if we were to make budget asks, how will this play into that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and I will also defer to Executive Director Kalicki, and if there's anything he would like to add. I would just state in brief, in the staff report, it lays out the operational reserve that we are carrying, and for several reasons, primarily the more limited number of full-time equivalent staff than we budgeted for. We are carrying over a pretty significant reserve. I believe, and I think that was the consensus of the Budget Committee as well, which voted unanimously to recommend this fee level. There will be sufficient funding available that the fee could support for additional projects. We also have a separate set-aside for the rent tracking system and other long-term projects, and that also is being carried over. But I appreciate the question, because one reminder that I wanted to make is that if your committees have specific asks that may be related to the need to budget funds in the next fiscal year, those really need to be provided to us as soon as possible.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, because I actually don't have any other questions, I'm going to vote in favor of this, first and foremost. I just hope that whether you be the chair next year or somebody else becomes the chair next year, just like how we have a beginning of the year agenda on when we meet and all that, and how we set up deadlines for when to turn in agenda items. I would really like it if we had a process for that, because I think it's very important that we have a process on how exactly we make financial asks and how exactly we do budgeting for those who are not on the committee. And that's just an ask. I mean, like I said, the chair can do whatever they want, whether it's here or in the committee structure who they are elected chair, but I asked the chair to do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Simon Weisberg?
Just to be clear that the budget's not been finalized, so this is the time to be sharing what you want in the budget. I don't know if that was.
Okay, Commissioner Sotovejil?
I'm going to support this, of course, but we're the only governing body in the city of Berkeley that doesn't own property. Maybe because we're rent stabilization, we think we should be paying rent. How can we look long-term at the Budget and Personnel Committee looking at us buying our own property? Because at the end of the day, it would reduce the cost of we wouldn't have to have the reg fee so high later on. So if you can look at what it would take for the rent board to purchase a home in the city. Thank you. Maybe 300 for like 10 years or something would be the fee. I don't know.
Commissioner Trigup?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is something that has been discussed at a high level at the Budget Committee, only as a statement of alternatives that did not seem at the time as a viable alternative, but I was hoping that Director Kalikian might be able to shed some light on the current state of how much property costs and why exactly we ended up not pursuing this.
A little over a year ago, when we were beginning negotiations for our current lease, and we ended up continuing in our current office spaces, and we signed a lease for at least 4 more years. One of the first things we did at the board's request, we looked into the process and the costs related to purchasing properties. There was limited places available, and it was expensive, and I believe it would have involved probably going to the voters for a bond was at the time. So we discussed it. I believe brought it back to the Budget Committee, certain that are in closed session to the board, and basically that at the time wasn't viable. We can certainly look into what the process would be if we wanted to do it. But again, we're at this point we're in our current lease for another 4 years. So if we moved and got out of the lease, we'd have to build those costs in as well.
Okay, thank you. So if no more questions, I move that we accept the recommendation to adopt Resolution 1908 and 1909.
So moved. Oh, it was moved and wait.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Second was Commissioner Trigup.
You moved it, I think. Got it.
And I moved it.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Alpert.
Aye.
Chang?
Yes.
Murphy?
Yes.
Pablet?
Yes.
Solowski?
Yes.
Sotovejil? Oh,
Yes.
excuse me, I apologize. Simon Weisberg?
Yes.
Sotovejil?
Yes.
Tregu?
Yes.
Liberte?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, good. So now we go to item 6A3, and it's a recommendation to the revision of the rent board meeting procedures. Commissioner Trego, I'm going to let you discuss this because you brought it up. We did work together on this and making it more clear on how the chair makes recommendations with committees.
Yeah, and perhaps because I am supportive of the amendments that have been proposed, maybe whoever proposed them, that might have been you, Madam Chair, could just state, I will make a motion to adopt the item with those amendments.
Yeah, actually, so the procedures, going through the procedures, I'm going to be coming back next month and making these procedures much clearer because they are a bit confusing if you look at them. And one of the issues we came across is committee appointments and meetings. And so we're trying to clarify this because In the future, I want people who become chairs, that they come in and they understand exactly how they can do this, what they need to do, how they can follow. It's a bit confusing now, so this is just like one section. We're going to clear this up, and then next month I'm going to come back with a more cleaner version. And it's incorporating everything that's already been done through the years. This would be, you know, we've had these board procedures were first adopted in November 1994. And then there was a revised version in November 2014, and then updated in November 2016. And this year we've had 2 revisions, so hopefully we'll have a 3rd revision, and it'll be just much clearer. I admit it's just a little nerve-wracking to be chair, I admit, but I want to make sure that everybody who comes in kind of really understands it and can go clearly through as a chair. So one of the changes that I just want to make a couple tweaks to what Commissioner Tragub and I changed. So there's a section on section 1B, and the change would be the chair may appoint 1 alternate per committee to the extent that the compliance with the Brown Act is maintained. The alternate may serve as a member of a committee when 1 or more members are absent. I'd like to make that update. And then on...
Yeah, that's good. That is good.
It's good. And then on section 2A, it says, I'd like to change the midterm...
You'd like to add the word midterm?
Yeah, midterm.
In front of removal.
Yes, removal and replacement of a committee member. That's it, but everything I think is very clear about the rules, about having committee members on, having members on committees, and what can be done when there's a question about the members or people, when the chair wants to move people or not.
Yeah, so I'd like to save or get some of your time back. So I will move this with the 2 amendments, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there is a second.
She already moved it.
Oh. Has it been?
I don't think we've moved it, no.
Made the motion.
We're voting on this?
I'd like
I thought
to
you're coming
second.
back.
Thank you.
Wait, we're voting on this? I thought you're coming back with language next time.
Well, I'm coming back with other language for other issues in this procedures, in the procedures, but right now we're looking at changing and clarifying the section on committee appointments and meetings.
Yeah, so I am a little concerned about the appointment process. Based on what I've read, it means that people like Commissioner Solosky and Commissioner Sotomayor would not be able to introduce an agenda item to challenge a chair's decision. That's based on what I've read under the current new edits for the appointment procedures. Naturally, I am concerned. I hope that this is something that people would consider. Everybody wants to change the world. Nobody wants to change. And I'm very concerned about the fact that we're just changing rules to make changes fit what people want, instead of allowing people to express themselves and have the ability to look inside for change.
So to clarify, Commissioner Chang, there weren't any rules before. It was open. So right now, what we're doing is memorializing the rules of how appointments are made, and when there's a challenge to an appointment, what steps to follow. We're actually putting in writing what can be done. So.
So would you entertain a friendly amendment allowing for board members to be able to challenge those appointments?
Can
Well, so let's see, we have a comment for Commissioner Sotomayor.
Right, so I think the question is on 2A. Does that language, it's a question, does that language explicitly forbid a commissioner from placing an item on the agenda asking for the chair to replace someone? Or be moved, that a committee appointment be changed? That's the question. I think the way it's currently written, you can say yes to that you are forbidden as a commissioner to do that. So if we can change that that would be, I think, helpful to move this item forward. And it has it's only procedural questions here, right? Does it in effect bar a commissioner from placing something on the agenda? I think it does.
Yeah, I mean, and, oh, sorry.
Okay, so Commissioners Alpert.
So, I mean, I think first of all, it respectfully does the opposite of what you're suggesting, which is that it requires the chair, when a commission appointments are being made, to get the consent of the board, right? So this explicitly requires, before any appointments are made, to get the consent of the board to appoint people. The question is afterward, after an appointment has been made, can someone be removed? And what this does is it says the chair has to remove them, and it requires a 2/3 vote. But nothing in section 2A would prevent someone from putting an item on the agenda asking the chair to do something. It wouldn't have the force of removing someone, but it would force us to have a discussion about that. But I would not support allowing a simple majority without the chair to remove someone. I think as is written is fine.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Chan.
Yeah, first and foremost, I understand that English is my second language, but I do know how to read. And the bottom line is that the language here on 2A specifically says the removal or replacement of a committee member may only be proposed by the chair, and that is the point that I am challenging.
But that's the prerogative of the chair, and that's a prerogative of the chair right now.
Yes, I understand.
Right,
So-
but what I think he's saying is, oh, sorry, okay.
Okay, so that's what we have. Commissioner Traeger.
Yeah, I think the questions have been answered to some extent. I just wanted to echo that currently there are no rules. And in fact, what we have now is a less democratic process than the one the council goes through, where the mayor proposes committee appointments on the consent calendar, and generally it's affirmed as a consent item, but it's still affirmed by the council. For the last, I don't know how many years, possibly since the inception of the rent board, the chair has had sole discretion at the rent board to make any appointments to committees that they deem fit without any assent or affirmation required by the rent board. This changes it, where the rent board's consent is now needed in order to make changes. Further, it provides goalposts or guideposts that make it very difficult for the chair to unilaterally remove a committee member mid-term. That can only be done by a 2/3 vote of the rent board. The intent of that is to reduce, not for this term, but should there at some point be a future chair, none of whom is sitting on this board right now, who would like to punish someone for whatever reason for removing them, that could only be done with the consent of 2/3 of members of the rent board, with the one exception to that being if someone is out of town for a short period of time and the committee needs to meet, and in order for quorum to be achieved, then there's a provision to temporarily remove someone. So I am not friendly to the proposed changes because I think what is actually being done is to democratize the process.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, thank you. We have a second, so let's take a vote.
Ask one interpretation, because I agree, this is a democratization.
I haven't acknowledged you yet, so we've already had discussion on this? You know, we've already talked about this. I think we should go on to vote on it, because we've...
But Chairperson, I think we're confused on the language, and I'd like to ask our legal person here whether or not a commissioner would be unable to bring an item forward under committee appointments under that language in our rules.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Could you point to the exact clause that you're talking about?
2A1? Under the committee appointments and meetings section? Or 2A, I'm sorry, just 2A.
Oh, 2A, okay. Yeah, it looks, I mean, it looks to be the chair may propose to remove or replace a member or alternate of any committee. The removal or replacement of a committee member may only be proposed by the chair. Yep.
And the language in 2A is the midterm removal or replacement of a committee member may only be proposed by the chair and subject to affirmative vote of 2/3. So it's not going to be that easy.
Correct.
If someone decides like, hey, I'm going to remove somebody from this committee because I'm not happy with the whatever, then it takes the whole board to be able, for the chair to be able to remove the person.
I don't think it's about removal. It's more about not being allowed to present an item saying, I really want to be on the 4x4.
Right.
So I want the board to vote and listen to my argument. This would prevent that. And I don't think that's fair. I've always been the type of person that doesn't want elected officials to be silenced or being able to put forward proposals,
Okay.
ever, under any circumstance.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Alpert.
Could I offer, if we change the word proposed to initiated, would that allow, I think regardless what the intention is, or I think what the Commissioner Sotovich Hill is saying is that someone should be able to put an item on the agenda to, like.
For anything.
Well, yes, but to, specifically to have a conversation about whether someone should be removed. Which I think the intention of A is that the chair can only the chair can initiate removal. But anyone should be able to initiate discussion of removal, if that makes sense.
No.
I mean, there's a subtle difference between proposed and initiated. They both require the chair to act. And from the way that I'm reading this, only the chair, because it does say may only.
You say only.
Okay, Commissioner Tregu.
Yeah. The intent of this set of amendments was to proceduralize something that, at least in my mind, became extremely chaotic at the last meeting, maybe because I was calling in from Iowa and I just couldn't catch every single thing. But it seemed like we spent an hour of taxpayer time, taxpayer-funded time, dealing with this situation. And so I've been on the rent board for close to 7 years, on and off, 7 full years. And never in my 7 years, nor in the additional 7 other years that I've been absorbing the rent board process, have I seen a proposal come through the commission that was seeking to overrule the decision of the chair. I think if we elect a chair with a majority vote, there is a reason, and we are trusting that chair with their appointments. This does provide a path forward, a mechanism. When the chair initiates the appointment process, there's an opportunity for discussion to be had, and if more than a majority of the rent board feels that the committees should be constituted differently, then the chair has the opportunity to make new appointments that better reflect the will of the rent board. In reading this proposal, I actually think it's silent on the question of someone bringing something forward to overrule the chair, but I do not believe in general that doing so is a good practice.
Commissioner Murphy.
Okay, so Commissioner Tregu, it seemed as if the reason why this was brought forward was because when I had requested to be on a certain committee, I thought that the chair was going to pick a committee for me as well, like when John Solosky was the chair, there was a committee I was on that I told him I did not want to be on, and he said it wasn't up to me, it was up to him, it was his leadership, and so I appreciated that. So I thought that's what was going to happen this go-around. So therefore, it was brought forward to ask if I can be on the 4x4, because it was, like, I didn't understand that I was asked what all committees I wanted to be on. So it seems like if we use the word only, then it's not being fair, and then a person like me wouldn't be able to come forward and say, hey, I would like to propose to be on this committee and to remove someone else and to be replaced with that person.
Can I actually speak to that?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I neglected to mention that Commissioner Murphy, and I know we had this discussion, and I'm sorry if this was unclear, but one thing that is in this proposal that wasn't in the rules previously, because there were no rules, is the chair can now appoint alternates. If there is interest among more than 4 members of the full board to serve on a particular committee, such as the 4x4, then it gives the chair the opportunity to appoint essentially 5 people, just making sure that not all 5 people can be at the same meeting at the same time, but it does allow the member who's an alternate to attend any time that 1 or more regular members cannot attend that committee. And so this is something that opens it up in a way that has never been opened up before. And I remember in the 2008 through 2010 timeframe, when I, actually for 4 years, for my first 4 years on the rent board, I lobbied the chair very heavily at the time to serve on the 4x4 committee. She ended up then making a decision not to appoint me, and I understood that I could argue passionately that I felt that I was the best person to be one of the 4 members, but once the chair made her decision, I did not contest it in a public forum. Nothing in this set of proposals is there a change from that, but the one thing that is different is that it allows for there to be an alternate member. I think had this been in place when I really wanted to be on the 4x4, then perhaps the chair would have been more open to putting me in at least as an alternate member.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Commissioner Chang, and then I'm going to call to question.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm really glad that Commissioner Sotovejil and Commissioner Solosky decided to withdraw their previous motion, because I do think it is good that there has become a resolve. That being said, this item itself completely reopens the previous item and relitigates those type of things. And I can't help but feel like these things are just a reaction to what was proposed, and this is not a proactive way of legislating, this is reactive. I think this consolidation prize of being an alternate, you know, it kind of reminds me of Miss Universe. I mean, being Miss Universe is great, and being the alternate is great, but nobody really wants to be the alternate. When you're second place, you're actually the first to lose. So, you know, that being said, you know, so I'm going to vote no, but either way, I look forward to following these new rules, and I'm excited to see how this new board is going to be.
Okay, thank you. So let's do a roll call.
Okay, this is to adopt the proposed revisions as stated to the Red Board meeting procedures. Commissioner Alpert.
Aye.
Chang.
No.
Murphy. No. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No.
Thank you. Blatt.
Yes.
Solosky.
No.
Simon Weisberg.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Sotovejil.
No.
Tregu.
Yes.
Liberde.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-4.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to item Now we go to section 7, let's see, information announcements and news articles. Executive Director, we have 7A1, 2/3 year budget update.
But much of the budget update was in the report on the registration fee, so I can do this very briefly and just see if anybody has any questions. We are anticipating, we now, last month you got the mid-year budget report. This month you get the 2/3 budget report. We're still in very good shape. Largest savings will be in fringe benefits, salary and benefits total, but fringe benefits specifically. As we reported last month, will be higher than budgeted in the annual rent. And we will be collecting, or we've already collected at this point in the year, what we budgeted for the entire year. So I'm anticipating that by the end of the year, we'll have collected about $75,000 in excess of what we budgeted. So bottom line, when you adopted your budget last year, you thought we'd deficit spend by about $72,000 this year. At this point, between the primarily salary or benefit-related savings, as well as the additional revenue that we'll be collecting, it'll be more like $70,000 at least in the positive. So it's almost like a flip. So by the end of the year, your available fund balance would be, your uncommitted and available fund balance would be about $885,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back on Commissioner Cheng's excellent point that he made, and I'm thinking maybe, Jay, it might be helpful if you provide us with a proposed date certain by which you would like any committees that have proposals that require funding to bring back to the board those proposals.
The next few weeks would be great. We began this weekend in looking and starting on the cost side of it. Once we wrote all the reports related to the revenue, the fees, then Leif and I and Allison started turning toward what we're going to be asking for, at least from the staff perspective. So if there are other things out there, again, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Commissioner Cheng, the recommendations you made at the outreach committee a few years ago we could easily absorb. So if it's much more important if there's something of a larger scope that would be more costly, the earlier we know, the better able we'd be able to address it.
Okay, Commissioner Cheng.
And just so you know, I'm sorry if my comments seem very demeaning or demanding. I just really hope that in the future that we have more of a spelled out process and timeline, and that's it. Okay,
great. So, and then I want to go to item 728 for the, just for the executive director to give us an update on the recruitment and the Runport staffing model.
Yeah. In your packet is a copy of the recruitment for the deputy director position. This has been mailed to, I think, emailed to over 100 organizations. U.S. posted mail to probably another 50 to 75 organizations. That's in addition to the places that the Human Resources Department generally posts. It's been out since the beginning of April, and the deputy director position closes April 29th. So hopefully we'll be doing interviews by the end of May.
Okay, great. So, and the next item, it talks about our attendance.
A few other recruitments and personnel-related
Sorry.
things. We also have pending at this time a hearing examiner. We're doing a hearing examiner eligibility list, which is open, I believe, till the end of next week, so people get the word out. We have hired 2 career Office Specialist 2s, and they started on April 1st, and they're both fantastic. We're really, really excited. Next week, I'll be interviewing for a 6-month temporary Office Specialist 2, primarily to assist with registration, the annual registration. Let's see, and we're implementing, there's a backlog that's developed in the hearings unit. So what we're in the process of doing, and we're going to be implementing it next, starting next week, is for the past several years, a hearing examiner has been the supervisor of the public information unit, and her services are really needed in the hearings unit at this point. So we're going to try plowing through that backlog, getting to more reasonable turnaround time and getting decisions out, or getting cases heard and decisions out. What I've done is I've appointed 2 people to act as temporary supervisors, one on the registration side and one on the public information unit side. And we'll be bringing back to the board in June a recommendation for permanent staffing model. Might be that change, but that's basically the discussions that first we're having within staff, what we're going to recommend to the committee, and then we'll see what the budget committee recommends to the board. But I hope that we'll have a staffing model that we can feel comfortable with and live with for the next several years, cobbled together by June for the board's adoption by the end of June.
Great, and then one question, go ahead.
I was curious what the kind of hoped timeframe is for between when someone requests a hearing and when it's heard, and where we're at now.
What are we at as far as when something's heard, 4 to 6 months? Yeah. Now, we do have some hearings that must be resolved within a specified time frame, but if it's not something that's the time frame isn't legislated, I believe we got to between up to 4 to 6 months, generally closer to the 4 months before a case is heard, and in some cases, it could be 6 to 8 months by the time a decision was issued. Part of it was we lost a hearing examiner, so we were 1 examiner short for 5, 6, 7 months. Part of it was also last year we had a glut of hearings, particularly the more complicated hearings with fixed timeframes that we had to respond. But
Okay.
we definitely want to, that's an area we're definitely moving to improve.
Okay, our next item is on commissioners' attendance for February and March. Everyone was attendance. We've had 1 excused absent in February and another excused absence in March. So moving on to the next item, item 4, I'd like to hear about our upcoming Rent Board outreach event. Executive or?
I can do that, or the committee, the chair. Okay, yeah, there's a few things in here that we've done. As there's a flyer for our Subletting 101 workshop, which we did on April 10th, which was very, very successful. That was a seminar primarily for tenants. We were at Cal Day at the Basic Needs Center, and there was a lot of foot traffic and good questions from incoming students during students and parents that day. We will be at the Cal Off-Campus Housing Fair next Wednesday, and we just had a tenants' rights workshop and are hosting a Landlord 101 workshop at the end of April.
Great. So the next 6 items are articles that were presented by a variety, or a couple of the commissioners. I suggest everyone read them. There's some really good ones. Airbnb lost in Santa Monica Bay, that's item 6. And then I would suggest also people reading item 10. It's from Columbia School of Business, and it's titled Return of Rent Control. New research shows benefit of decades-old affordable housing approach. So the articles are all very good. I hope everyone's reading them, and thank you all the commissioners for proposing them. I would suggest that all commissioners be adding articles to this information item. It shows that we're up to date and we are up to date about what's happening with rent control and the housing issue, not only here in Berkeley, the Bay Area, but beyond. Okay, and next go to Section 8, Committee Board Meeting Updates and Announcements. So Budget and Personnel. Any updates?
Oh, yes. We have solved all of life's problems now. Now, I think we're going to need to meet one more time to finalize our budget or make a recommendation to the board. And that meeting has not been scheduled yet, but we're looking at sometime out in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So yes, if you have any proposals that might have a budgetary impact, please bring them to staff so that they can share them with this committee. Thank you.
Okay, and Eviction Section and 8 foreclosure?
We're meeting on Wednesday, May 1st at 5 p.m., and we'll be reviewing the contracts with the legal service providers.
Great. For the HASH Committee, the Chair?
Thank you. So we had a pretty short meeting on April 2nd, and thank you for all the commissioners who came. And we basically, the main thing that we really talked about is improving Berkeley's resiliency before a disaster. And I actually want to thank Commissioner Tregub on that. And then the other thing is, of course, we talked about the possible action and discussion on the scope of our committee work. That's it.
Great. And okay, and for RI, AGA, and registration?
We've met twice this session, and what the staff are making proposals of regulations that will help make things more streamlined and easier to provide answers for, and so we appreciate the staff going into that detail. And then I believe for the next agenda, we're also going to be looking at the Tenant Opportunity Protection Act and how that might, what interplay that might have with rent control.
Great. And our last one, Outreach Committee?
Thank you. We are actually, our next meeting is really going to focus on the survey. So the commissioners will be reviewing the surveys and basically give feedback on what they would like to change or add to the previous survey that will be renewed. And just so you know, the previous members on the outreach committee, their input is still currently being considered. So for those of you who are on there, I want you to know that your suggestions are still being inputted. And if they're not, when it gets presented to the board, I certainly hope that you will make sure that you get heard again. But I'm pretty sure we're integrating everybody's suggestion.
Which survey are you talking about?
There is a decade, like every 10 years, we do a survey for all tenants to figure out the state of the tenant thing. The other thing I want to say is I do want to apologize to Christine Shorts. We did plan to present a proclamation, and I know that there was a Facebook post and an event inviting a lot of people, and as the chair, I'm obviously embarrassed, and I apologize for that. I hope that we can work better and do better to make sure that things are delivered on time.
Great.
I got a question about that.
Sure, go ahead.
It's not only for the outreach committee, but all the committees. When we vote for something to be placed on the agenda, as we did in this situation, what happens next? I thought it was going to be on this agenda per our vote in committee.
I'm not aware of the vote, so I haven't been made aware. I'm not sure when the committee voted to do that. I know there was a general vote at a meeting that I was at a few months ago that something should be done, but I thought somebody was going to take responsibility for doing that. So if that happened, I hadn't been informed yet. So I'm a little in the dark about the second phase of what happened.
So I guess there must have been some miscommunication, but for our committee and other committees, when they want to put something on the agenda, prior to the deadline, it should be on the agenda, correct?
Generally, yes, but again, something has to be, and again, it might have happened in this case, and we just dropped the ball, I don't know. But there's something, if you just say, for something to be an action item, there has to be a written report, there has to be something done, there has to be a specific recommendation. You can't just have something vague like, we should do an item on. So once, and again, it has to be.
I didn't see anything that was.
So I'm sorry.
Okay.
In order to do it.
So as the chair, regardless of whose fault it is, I will take responsibility just because this is something very, 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 very new, and we are doing something new that is out of the norm. I hope that we continue to do this, so I will take responsibility. Obviously, next time I hope that communication will be better on everybody's parts, including my part, and let's not make this an issue. The only person that should be upset is Christine Shorts. She was the one that's getting the award and expecting the award. So for those of us, we should just, including, especially myself, I apologize.
Commissioner Trigup.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to commend the chair and the members of this committee for voting or discussing in a general or specific way, having a proclamation for Christine Schwartz. I think this is very well deserved. And Christine, based on our conversation on your availability, maybe you can just nod, would June still be a good time certain? So can we just agree to schedule that proclamation for June?
Yeah, and just so you know, the language was written and by Alejandro, and so the language is written, just so you know. But yes.
And again, I apologize if.
No worries. I mean, like I said, I will take responsibility. Like, let's just all try to be better.
Okay, so the next item is on the 4x4 Joint Committee on Housing it. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, Commissioner Murphy.
I would just want to say, Christine Shorts, I really appreciate you. You are one of the most dedicated community members I ever met. You go to all the city council meetings, you come to all the rent board meetings, and I really appreciate you. I hope at some point we can include you in the budget for the media, because you deserve it.
So regarding the 4x4 Committee, we have not met and since our last meeting. And so we're hopefully we'll be meeting sometime in May. So
I got a communication today and from the mayor's office, and they wanted me to check on availability for May 10th. So if people can check their calendars and let me know, that's what's been, May 10th has been what's proposed initially.
Okay, so I move that we adjourn the agenda, the
Meeting.
the
Second.
meeting. Got a second?
Yes. I think that's,
Okay.
Meeting is over, thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. We made it through another one.